Chapter 81. The Man with the Star on His Chest and the Plan. It wasn't until Duke left that everyone realized something was amiss. Initially, they were stunned by Duke's supernatural power, but soon they recognized that the letter he presented didn't actually prove anything. Although the handwriting looked very similar and there were handprints, it didn't provide any concrete evidence. If this were to go to court, they could even request Dr. Erskine's body back. After all, lawsuits in the United States are notoriously lengthy and complicated, and the current system has many exploitable loopholes. For instance, the first person to be notified should be the doctor's immediate family member. If there is no immediate family member, it should be passed on to uncles, brothers, and sisters. The second in line is the unit where the doctor worked, which is the military. The last consideration is the so-called last words. This letter was too simplistic, full of loopholes, and could easily be faked, making it impossible to prove its authenticity. Generally, such a letter would not be approved. Unfortunately, the shock of the supernatural power was so great that by the time they realized the flaws, Duke had already disappeared. Senator Brad was furious. "Colonel, I need an explanation for this. Who is that guy? How can he enter our secret laboratory so openly?" Colonel Chester Phillips, although somewhat resistant to Duke, did not see him as an enemy. He was simply disgusted by these mysterious practices. Similarly, he was even more disgusted with the bureaucratic committees. "All right, then first explain how a German spy, sitting in your car, managed to sneak into my secret base," the colonel retorted, leaving the senator embarrassed. The next day, Colonel Chester Phillips issued new orders. "Starting today, the Strategic Science Force has a new mission. We are going to fight Hydra to the death. Pack your bags, Agent Carter. You too, Stark. We will fly to London tomorrow night." "Sir, if you want to deal with Schmidt, I will join as well," Captain America volunteered. "You're a guinea pig. You've got to go to Alamogordo," the colonel replied. "But the serum worked," Captain America protested, frustrated at being treated as a mere tool. At that moment, he seemed to understand Dr. Erskine's thoughts. "What I wanted was an army, but it turned out to be only you. You alone are not enough." Colonel Phillips shook his head. "What's worse, forget it. Death is the most important thing." The colonel sighed and turned away. He actually wanted to scold Dr. Erskine. Although the letter was suspicious, he understood the doctor's intentions. From the moment the doctor chose Rogers over Hodge, he knew it. The doctor worried that these super soldiers would become social cancers and bullies in the future, endangering the country. As for Colonel Phillips, his goal was to take down Adolf and end the war. Whether these soldiers became bullies later was a future concern and not his immediate problem. In his view, no matter how bully-like they became, they would never be a match for the state apparatus. But he never anticipated that Dr. Erskine had planned to sacrifice himself all along. Although he was very upset, he still admired the doctor. Not everyone can die with faith. He really wanted to scold that old guy face to face, but unfortunately, there was no chance. "It's not that I have a problem with the colonel. I think he's missing the point. I see your ability, Steve. More importantly, the whole country sees it," Brad said. "What did you see? A skinny guy turned into a tall guy with pectoral muscles?" "Newspaper," Brad exclaimed. Unlike the original story, the newspaper now published Mysterious Man Defeats Namizu Saves Children. The former story involved holding a car door and rescuing someone who fell into the water, while the latter involved shooting and killing several Namizu outside an antique shop, saving children who were almost killed by the Namizu guns. This change was also thanks to Diana's influence. Captain America was in the midst of a special fighting training session. If it weren't for her, he might not have been able to rescue him in time. With his body contorted at an impossible angle, he grabbed a car door and hurled it, just in time to block the incoming bullets. The remarkable part was that Captain America didn't throw the car door forward, but backward, with a graceful and confident posture. "Since your deeds were reported, the streets are full of people wanting to join the army. We can't let an idol-level figure hide in the laboratory," someone remarked. "Son, do you want to serve the country on the most important battlefield?" another voice asked. "I can't ask for anything more," Captain America replied. "Then congratulations, you have been promoted." Captain America laughed. Who wouldn't want to get promoted and achieve success? But the next moment, he found himself putting on tights. This isn't what I thought it would be, he muttered. Meanwhile, in Karajan, Wahaha! A bond salesman, a man with a star on his chest hiding a plan. Wahaha! Duke laughed so hard he almost convulsed. Dr. Abraham Erskine, holding a newspaper, popped a few salt-baked peanuts into his mouth. This is a waste of my life, he exclaimed, though his expression betrayed his amusement. The old man was clearly joking. The doctor, who had supposedly died in the laboratory yesterday, was a fake, just a phantom. The real Dr. Erskine had been pulled into the mirror space by Duke without anyone noticing. Hey, this is the only way for a person to grow up, Duke said. Old man Phillips has a lot of ideas. There was no report on the senator's affairs, and Duke didn't want to act too badly. No, Colonel Phillips probably wouldn't do that. It looks more like Senator Brad's idea, Dr. Erskine replied. Oh, forget it. Let's not talk about him. How are you feeling today? Duke asked, throwing a few peanuts into his mouth and sipping a glass of wine, clearly enjoying himself. I have to thank you for exposing me to a whole new world, Dr. Erskine laughed. After entering Karazhan, a brand new door had opened before him, revealing an unparalleled world. Outside the mage's tower, no matter how far he ran, he couldn't reach the woods on the outer circle. After running all afternoon, he was almost exhausted, yet it felt like he was still spinning in place. One moment he was on an ordinary path, and the next he could step into a polar glacier or fall into a lava valley. It was exhilarating. In short, without authority, one shouldn't wander around Karazhan, as there were traps everywhere. No, I asked you to come here because I think it's a pity that you died. On the other hand, I also need you to be my subordinate and help me, Duke explained, waving his hand dismissively. But I'm just an ordinary person. How can I help you? Dr. Erskine was puzzled. Duke took out a small piece of mana essence and placed it on the table. This is your next task. What is this? Dr. Erskine examined the red crystal, unable to figure out what it was. A treasure that can rejuvenate people, Duke revealed. What? The doctor let go of the crystal in shock, but quickly caught it again, his reaction just in time. End of this chapter. Chapter 82, Captain America and his Roaring Commando. Such a small piece can restore you to your prime, Duke said, continuing to nibble on peanuts. Really? Dr. Abraham Erskine's eyes sparkled with hope. He had thought he wouldn't have time to explore this new world, given his age. At most, he had 10 years left, and after that, he wasn't sure if his mind would keep up. But now, the possibility of rejuvenation changed everything. Yes, really, but you'll have to figure out how to use it yourself. I'll get you the necessary equipment and instruments later, Duke replied, finishing his peanuts and wiping his mouth. Your task is to convert it into a liquid state with an indefinite retention time. Additionally, I want its maximum utilization. Okay, I'll try, Dr. Erskine nodded after a moment of thought. Good, I believe you can do it, Duke said, turning to leave. He had discovered that while using magic to absorb the power of life, a portion of it was lost. When injected into the human body, a small part was also lost. The utilization rate was less than 50%, even in ideal conditions. For non-magicians, the rate was very low, and for ordinary people, it was less than 10%, with more than half of the life force wasted. Dr. Erskine was a researcher of potions, which is why Duke chose him. It was also for the Hulk later on, but he couldn't spoil too much. In short, Duke wanted the power of these crystals to be utilized to the maximum extent. These were materials given by the system to build Karazhan, and they were running out. The system only provided gemstones of 5 types: red dragon, blue dragon, bronze dragon, green dragon, and black dragon. The red dragon essence was the core that bound the entire Karazhan. The blue dragon essence acted as a magical force that complemented the red dragon essence. The threat that Gu Yi felt was mainly from the magical oppression of the blue dragon essence. The bronze dragon essence controlled the power of time, and the black dragon essence represented the earth. These two complemented each other, setting up traps around Karazhan. The lava hell and polar glaciers that Dr. Erskine accidentally strayed into were based on the essence of the black dragon. As for the more mysterious time trap, he had not encountered it yet. Or rather, he had encountered it, but didn't realize it. No matter how far you ran, you couldn't escape the distant forest, which was an application of time limitation. The green dragon essence controlled dreams, and dream traps were scattered throughout and outside the tower. After building Karazhan, there was still a small amount of magic essence left, but it wasn't much, so Duke had to be careful with its use. Buying more from the mall would be costly. Time flew by, and several months passed in the blink of an eye. Duke had been staying in Karazhan, reading newspapers and paying close attention to the movements of the man with a star on his chest and a plan hidden. Still reading his news? Diana walked over with 2 cups of coffee. "If it weren't for your good performance at night, I would have thought you fell in love with a man," she teased, taking a sip of her coffee. "Coffee with milk, not bad." "Me? Heh, don't worry, I will never fall in love with a man in this life. You created a little monster, so of course I have to pay attention. Yes, he is already worthy of the title Captain America." Duke smiled, picking up his coffee. He preferred it a bit bitter. "It has nothing to do with me. It's Dr. Erskine's credit. Without me, he would still be Captain America." Diana shook her head. "However, you added fuel to his journey. How about leaving him alone?" Duke suggested, placing the newspaper on the table. Captain America and his roaring commando had taken down more than a dozen strongholds. Hydera's power had taken a significant hit. The once skinny guy from Brooklyn had gradually grown into a formidable force. "Well, let's head to school," Diana said. After leaving Camp Caspian, she returned to school, this time to study the arts. 20 years ago, she was a doctor, but sitting in a hospital office every day had become monotonous. During the day, she was a doctor, and occasionally she became a solitary hero walking in the dark at night. This was Diana's routine during the 21 years that Duke had been asleep. Wearing a magical mask, she appeared to be in her 30s. Logically, she should look 40 to outsiders, but she was well maintained. Eventually, she found the hospital work so dull that she quit and went back to school. It was just a change of identity. She had a passion for art, especially sculpture. Watching a plaster cast transform into a beautiful work of art in her hands was rewarding. Diana had a tranquil temperament. Despite her powerful and mature aura, she wouldn't have reappeared in the public eye if Grandpa Batman hadn't found the photo. Going to school was good for her. It allowed her to experience societal changes and stay informed. If it weren't for Duke's request, she wouldn't have gone to Camp Caspian to train Captain America. Seeing Captain America with a shield in the newspaper gave her the illusion that she had become a pirated copy. The reason Captain America picked up the shield in this timeline was due to Wonder Woman's influence. As for the original timeline, Duke wasn't very clear. Few people in this period would go to the battlefield with shields, right? "Why don't you come to school with me?" Diana asked playfully. "Me?" Duke pointed to his nose in exaggerated surprise. "Let's forget it. I really don't understand why you like going to school so much. Just like you don't like school." "Okay," Duke shrugged. "So, is anyone chasing you?" In his previous life, he had attended various schools: kindergarten, elementary school, junior high school, university, all kinds of studies. When he wasn't in school, he was disciplined by his parents, in school by various teachers, after school by his bosses in different departments. His whole life was managed by others. Therefore, after time traveling, he decided he would no longer be managed by others, but would manage others instead. "Do you want to know if there is someone or not?" Diana smiled playfully. Of course there are. I'm so beautiful. Unless men are blind, they can't ignore me." "Who? I'll hack him to death." Duke stood up angrily. End of this chapter. Chapter 83. Make a choice, Rogers. The system released a new task. Retrieve the cosmic cube. "What?" Duke was momentarily stunned before exclaiming in astonishment. "What's wrong?" Diana asked, curious about his sudden reaction. "Oh, it's nothing. I just remembered something," Duke replied, trying to cover up his surprise with a smile. It had been a long time since the system had made an appearance. Although it might seem like only a second had passed, Duke had actually lived in the Star World for 21 years. The flow of time there was inconsistent. During those 21 years, he had no communication with the system and had even begun to think it was gone. He had grown accustomed to its absence, relying on the inheritance of Medivh to navigate this world. The sudden reappearance of the system caught him off guard. Retrieve the cosmic cube? Does that mean I have to deal with Captain America again? But what does the system want with the cosmic cube? Is it going to break it down? Duke pondered. Hey, you only give missions but no rewards? He asked the system. Reward, 1 card draw, the system responded. What level? Duke inquired. No level, random, new magnification, the system clarified. Duke understood. It was like a newbie gift package, but reduced by 10 times. Honey, tell me, why is Hydra's technology so advanced? It feels like it doesn't belong to this world at all. Their weapons are at least decades ahead, Duke said, pretending to be displeased but genuinely curious. Duke had always wondered whether Hydra's blue light weapon was a laser or something else. The power came from the cosmic cube, a space gem, which meant it had space power. Did it teleport people somewhere like the Red Skull? Or was it a form of space transformation, turning those hit into carbon and making them disappear? You mean they have alien technology or tools left behind by the gods? Diana asked, frowning. Something like that, Duke replied, standing up. It seems I have to take a trip. Are you coming? I won't go. Diana shook her head. Why not? Duke asked. I just enrolled. It's not easy to skip class, Diana explained. Duke raised his hand and rubbed his forehead. I think you're addicted to school and can't extricate yourself. Diana shrugged and smiled. Fine, if you don't go, I guess there won't be much fighting in this battle, Duke said, shaking his head. I'll be back soon. In a small town that had been bombed, Captain America was drinking alone, holding the same kind of wine Dr. Erskine had once given him. His friend had died, falling off a cliff during a train mission, and was presumed dead. In fact, they might not even find a complete body. He didn't dare to search, afraid of what he might find. Why are you getting drunk here alone? A white portal lit up, and Duke walked out, smiling. Captain America was stunned for a moment before rubbing his eyes and standing up abruptly. Hello, instructor. Okay, I'm not your instructor anymore, so don't be so formal, Duke said, stepping forward and patting Captain America on the shoulder. But I'm very relieved. You've done a good job. I've heard about it. Sit down and talk. Captain America hesitated for a moment before gritting his teeth and asking, Instructor, you have the capability. Why don't you? Why don't I stand up and stop all these tragedies from happening? Are you accusing me? Do you think you're so good now that you can question me as an instructor? Duke smiled. I don't dare, Captain America replied. Humans, everyone should have a sense of responsibility to do their own job well and not to seek success if they are not in their positions. The job I want to do is much, Duke began, leaving the rest unsaid. The situation was more dangerous than a world war. If you live for another 70 years, you'll understand, Duke said. Well, if you do live that long, you'll witness an alien invasion. Why are you so negative? Steve Rogers asked, puzzled. Bucky, my childhood friend, he began. You mean James Barnes? He's still alive, Duke interrupted. Steve Rogers stood up abruptly, as if struck by lightning. What? Bucky is still alive? How is that possible? Instructor, you don't need to comfort me. He fell off a 100-meter cliff. It's impossible for him to be alive. I peeked into the time stream and saw him 70 years later, Duke replied calmly. Why, that's impossible, Captain America stammered. 70 years? How could Bucky survive for 70 years? Even if he were alive, he would be an old man by now. How could he recognize him? Despite his doubts, Steve never questioned Duke's abilities in occultism. Maybe Duke really could see the future. Instructor, you must have mistaken him for someone else. There are many people who look similar in this world, Steve insisted. I'm 100% sure it's James Barnes, Duke affirmed. I can't believe it. Captain America shook his head, still in disbelief. The idea was too far-fetched. Have you ever considered that Dr. Zola might have injected him with the super soldier serum? Duke suggested, smiling. Steve Rogers' body trembled. He looked up, his face a mix of shock and doubt. Suddenly, he remembered something. When he found Bucky had indeed been tied up in a laboratory. Could it be that? No, I have to go find him, Captain America declared, slamming the table. He stood up and turned to leave. At that moment, Peggy Carter arrived. There you are. I've been looking for you. Colonel Phillips is looking for you. Schmidt's final base has been confirmed. It is. She trailed off as she noticed Duke. Why are you here? Captain America gritted his teeth, pushed Agent Carter aside, and ran out. Get out of the way. Where are you going? Peggy Carter sensed something was wrong. I'm going to save Bucky, Steve replied. We've got less than 24 hours. Peggy Carter yelled after him. Captain America froze, turning his neck mechanically. What do you mean? According to the latest information, Schmidt has a weapon capable of destroying the world. It will be activated within 24 hours and then blow up the United States. And then, the whole world. Peggy Carter explained quickly. It's not that serious. It's nothing more than blowing up Washington, Duke said, walking out slowly. Now is the time for you to make a decision. Save your friend or stop Schmidt's attack. Captain America stood there, torn between his duty and his loyalty to his friend. End of this chapter. Chapter 84. A broken arm is thrown in. Captain America found himself in a dilemma. Instructor. Steve Rogers began, but Duke raised his hand to interrupt him. I know what you're going to say, but this decision is yours to make. However, I want to remind you, based on the future I've glimpsed in the time stream, if you choose to stop Schmidt, then you will probably die. Peggy Carter was slightly taken aback. If you choose to save your friend, then she may die. Duke continued, pointing at Peggy Carter, who was now stunned. Similarly, Captain America was also dumbfounded. Stop Schmidt, and you will die. Save your friend, and your sweetheart will die. How do you choose in this situation? Duke's words hung heavily in the air. Instructor, if you are going to stop Schmidt, Steve started again, but Duke waved his hand dismissively. This time, I'm just here to warn you and to let you know that your friend is still alive, so don't blame yourself. But you must understand, I'm busy right now. I'm protecting the world from invasions you can't even see. Compared to Schmidt's small skirmishes, the threats I face can truly destroy the world. Captain America and Peggy Carter gasped. They knew how powerful Duke was. Fighting in other realms? The thought was terrifying. Fate, I believe in myself, and I will definitely overcome fate, Captain America said, clenching his fists tightly. I'm sorry, Bucky. Forgive me. With that, he turned and walked outside. Peggy Carter took a deep look at Duke and followed. You passed the test, Duke said, causing Captain America to stop in his tracks. I'm going to rescue your friend. Where did he fall off the cliff? Duke asked. Steve was on the verge of tears, his eyes red. Don't tell me the place name. I don't know it. I need an exact map, Duke interrupted. Yes, a map, Captain America said, quickly searching his pockets, but finding no map. Instructor, follow me to the headquarters. Hey, Uncle Duke, why are you here? Howard Stark asked, curious after seeing Duke. I'm here to help you, Duke replied, patting Howard on the shoulder and handing him a piece of jade. Wear it around your neck. Looking at the white jade pendant in his hand, Howard had a puzzled expression. Uncle Duke, this is not very good. We are uncle and nephew. What are you thinking? Duke was annoyed and slapped him lightly. Wear it properly. It will save your life at critical moments. All right, I'll wear it, Howard chuckled, quickly taking off the necklace he was wearing and putting on the white jade pendant. Duke glanced at it, probably another token of love from one of Howard's many lovers. Duke patted Howard on the shoulder lightly and followed Captain America. He had decided to save Bucky. Bucky's fate was too tragic. Brainwashed daily, almost turned into a fool, and he even killed Tony's father, Howard, which caused a rift between Iron Man and Captain America, leading to the Avengers' split. Howard was his eldest nephew. He couldn't let him die as tragically as before. So he decided to save Bucky, and to prevent other Hydra killers from taking over Bucky's task, he gave Howard a jade pendant for self-defense. Those below the legendary realm would definitely not be able to break the defense. Colonel Chester Phillips also noticed Duke. What are you doing here? He asked. Duke was very strong, and with his help, they could better complete the task. But Duke ignored him completely. You're playing with fire, Duke said faintly, then left. The colonel's face turned livid. Playing with fire? Could you explain? This kind of mysterious behavior was the most annoying. Captain America quickly walked over with a map, pointing and saying, Instructor, this is where he should have fallen. Well, I'll try my best, and I hope he's still there when I go, Duke said, taking the map and leaving. When did Dr. Zola find Bucky and drag him away? It should be within 2, 3, 4, or 5 days. Because Bucky fell off the cliff, his arm was broken, he hemorrhaged profusely and suffered both internal and external injuries. Coupled with the cold weather, Bucky couldn't hold on for too long. The super soldier serum he was injected with is not perfect and not as strong as Captain America's. He hasn't fought for so long, and he is still an ordinary soldier, albeit one who looks stronger than most. Not much has changed at all. Under these conditions, terrain and temperature, he won't be frozen in ice for nearly 70 years like Captain America. He might die right away. Moreover, Dr. Zola had already been sent to Switzerland, and it was probably at this juncture that he was taken away. Duke flew over in a hurry, hoping to catch up. At the headquarters at this time. Hydra's last base is in the Alps, 500 feet below the surface, Colonel Phillips said. Then what should we do? The bearded man asked. You can't just knock on the door and go in. Why not? We'll just do it. Captain America got on his motorcycle and set off. Duke wandered around the place marked on the map and finally found Bucky under a hidden cliff. It was a dire situation. Bucky's arm was still broken and his body was covered with ice. Thanks to the cold weather, his wounds were frozen, which prevented further bleeding that could have been fatal. Just as Duke was about to take Bucky away, he heard intermittent footsteps and shouts in the distance. Let me look for them carefully. It should be here. Don't miss any suspicious place. Could it be such a coincidence that Dr. Zola came here? Ah, there's blood over there. Blood? Duke scanned the surroundings carefully and realized that Bucky didn't faint immediately after falling. Perhaps the super soldier serum played a role, allowing him to survive. After falling, he staggered and walked a certain distance before collapsing. Maybe he was trying to find his broken arm or a way out? Duke hurriedly opened the door of Karajan and threw Bucky inside. Hurry up and save him. Who is this? Okay, Dr. Erskine asked, quickly carrying Bucky to the operating table. When he looked again, Duke had disappeared. He had gotten used to Duke's secretiveness over the past few months. Shaking his head, he started the operation. Dr. Erskine used to be a doctor, too. Who is this man? Doubtson Carlos asked. I don't know. The boss disappeared after throwing him in. Dr. Erskine shrugged and checked Bucky's condition. This man's injury is quite serious. It's impossible for him to survive with his body. What happened? It's nothing. Dr. Erskine shook his head. Could it be the serum? This person's pulse is still very strong, which is unbelievable for a seriously injured patient. Judging by his clothes, he should be a soldier. Has he also been injected with serum? Zola? At this moment, the portal opened again, and a severed arm was thrown in. End of this chapter. Chapter 85. Grabbing Carter's Waist. In the last base of Hydra, Steve Rogers was chasing the Red Skull's Valkyrie and managed to run a record-breaking 2.333 meters in just a few seconds, a feat that would leave even Usain Bolt in awe. Despite his lungs feeling like they were about to burst, he still couldn't catch up with the Valkyrie, which was propelled by twin engines and an 8-wheel vortex boost. The triangular stealth bomber was incredibly fast, reminiscent of the B-2 Ghost bomber that the United States would develop 40 years later. Behind him, Colonel Chester Phillips, the guy driver, was driving the Hydra Schmidt and rushed over. This impressive vehicle, a two-door super sports car equipped with a 16-cylinder engine, was more accurately described as an off-road sports car with a rare 6-wheel configuration. Its interior was extremely simple and retro, resembling an old-fashioned aircraft-style center console. It was the only one of its kind in the world, and Duke's favorite sports car, a must-have for his collection. "Get in!" the driver shouted. With a roar, the car sped off in pursuit. Schmidt noticed and pressed the propulsion device, causing the Valkyrie to accelerate violently. Not to be outdone, Colonel Chester Phillips also pressed the nitrogen boost, and the car surged forward at an even faster speed. From a distance, it looked like the flaming car of Ghost Rider. Captain America stood up slowly, preparing to jump onto the landing gear. At that moment, Peggy Carter stopped him. "Wait," she called out, then kissed him. "Go and kill him." Captain America was momentarily confused. Was this a confession? He glanced at the driver, who shook his head and said, "I won't kiss you." As the car chased the plane towards a cliff, the Valkyrie began to take off. Captain America jumped up, aiming for the landing gear. The driver also swerved the steering wheel, causing the tires to spark against the ground. Then, an accident happened. Perhaps it was the distraction from the kiss or the memory of Duke's words warning him about Peggy Carter's safety. He glanced back subconsciously, and his hand slipped, failing to grab the landing gear. He fell. "No!" Peggy Carter screamed, standing up in shock. Captain America's heart nearly stopped. He suddenly remembered the instructor's words, "If you stop Schmidt, you may die." Not that Peggy Carter would die. If he chose to save Bucky, Peggy Carter would die. As he fell, he thought of his good friend Bucky and wondered if the instructor had found him. Was this the end? Watching the Valkyrie move away, Captain America closed his eyes, feeling as if he had already proven himself. "So you're starting to accept your fate? Just now you said you can defeat fate, and now you're giving up on yourself." "Tsk-tsk," a voice taunted. In the midst of his fall, Captain America suddenly felt his body stop. A strong anti-gravity force pulled him up, nearly breaking his arm. He opened his eyes. "Instructor," he exclaimed, "it's too early to give up now." Duke chuckled, flapping his wings violently. He drew a circle in midair and sped towards the Valkyrie. Yes, it was Duke. How could he not care about Captain America, or rather the Red Skull? The Red Skull wasn't planning to bomb Washington. He was targeting New York. Duke couldn't just sit by and watch his home get bombed. Although Karajan's magical defenses could withstand the Red Skull's bombs, he didn't want to live in a city surrounded by ruins. Moreover, while Karajan would be fine, the heroine Carlos and Samir were all outside. After finding Bucky, Duke had rushed over quickly, also keeping an eye on the Rubik's Cube. He had left a mark on Captain America, that allowing him to accurately perceive his location. The U.S. team was in a precarious situation. However, the magic Duke used had its limitations. When the distance exceeded a certain threshold, the magic would dispel itself. In other words, once beyond this limited range, Duke would no longer be able to perceive the position of the U.S. team. That's almost half of Europe, right? Red Skull was taken aback. "What the hell is that? A bird? No, that's wrong." Unfortunately, before he could see clearly, Duke entered his blind spot and quickly approached the Valkyrie. Before retracting the landing gear, Duke... Just then, there was a scream. "What?" Hydra Schmidt was slowly falling over the edge of a cliff. Peggy Carter stood up in horror and instinctively reached out to grab Captain America. Although she knew it was impossible to catch him, it was a human instinct. Then, tragedy struck. The rear two wheels of the sports car were already hanging off the cliff, barely maintaining a delicate balance. If she had been careful, she could have moved up a little bit. But when she stood up abruptly, her balance became unstable, and the car began to slide out little by little. The old man driver would not be guaranteed in his later years. "No!" Captain America yelled in horror as something happened to his sweetheart. "Slap!" Duke slapped him, waking Captain America. "I'm sure. Let's go." He threw his arm out violently. In fact, they were less than 5 meters away from the Valkyrie, and Captain America easily grabbed the landing gear. Then Duke turned around and flew towards the cliff. "I forgot to mention, I have already found your friend. Although he was seriously injured, fortunately he is still alive. Go and get rid of Schmidt. I'll save your sweetheart." Whoosh! Duke glided away. "Instructor," Captain America began. "Don't be a little girl." Duke flapped his wings and flew down. By this time, the landing gear had been slowly closing, and the U.S. team could no longer see outside. In one day, the instructor had helped him 3 times, saving Bucky, saving him, and now saving Peggy Carter. He believed that the instructor would be able to save Carter. After clearing his mind, he started to face Schmidt. About 50 meters away from Peggy Carter, Duke opened a portal with a flick of his hand, leading directly to Karajan. However, under the stunned eyes of Peggy Carter and the driver, Hydra Schmidt fell into the portal and disappeared, teleported to Karajan. Although the two of them didn't know what had happened for a moment, what was certain was that the car was safe. "Nima, isn't the key to saving people? Save the car." Duke pouted in his heart. "The car is his property, and you two are not, so of course the car should be rescued first." After ensuring the car was safe, he retracted his wings and quickly rushed towards the two of them. Approaching, he grabbed Peggy Carter's waist with his left arm, holding her close, while his right hand grabbed the driver's ankle, and they flew into the sky. Ah! The driver yelled as he was shaken. End of this chapter. Chapter 86. Remember to jump off the plane. Rescuing two people at the same time is quite exhausting, especially since they are both quite heavy. After all, he is a magician, not a warrior, and his physical strength is not very high. Of course, he can convert magic power into physical strength, but it still takes a toll. When they were about 1.5 meters from the ground, Duke threw the general driver down. Colonel Chester Phillips hit the ground with an ouch, barely surviving the fall. If it weren't for his age, Duke might have flown a little higher before letting go. I want to protest. Duke grabbed his leg, his head bleeding and feeling a bit dizzy. The most important thing was that holding one leg while the other was straddled awkwardly almost tore his long dormant muscles. Protest dismissed. You're not a beautiful woman. What more do you want? Duke glanced at the driver, annoyed. Instead of holding them by the waist and slowly hovering down, they had to make do with a rough landing. If there had been some snowflakes or peach petals, the effect would have been quite beautiful. Agent Carter, I saved you. How about a kiss as a reward? Duke said, seizing the moment. Holding Carter felt particularly exhilarating. Peggy Carter was panting heavily, her breath disordered from the near-death experience. Face to face, there was no gap between them. Duke could clearly feel the surging pressure of her chest, full of explosive energy. Agent Carter had a large frame, typical of European and American women, which supported a more substantial bust. Surviving a near-death experience, Peggy Carter didn't immediately realize she was being taken advantage of. She rolled her eyes. Do you really need a kiss? Why, if I say I need it, will you give it? Duke joked. No. Peggy Carter gasped. Forget it. You don't conform to my aesthetics. Your face is too big and too square. Duke curled his lips. Peggy Carter's face changed with anger. I know. You like your Diana. Indeed, Diana had a model's body. Peggy Carter smiled playfully. Why? Doesn't she suit your taste either? She took a deep breath, realizing Duke was taking advantage of her. Duke, with his thick skin, joked, Hush, you can keep your voice down. If she hears you, I'll be in trouble. He let go of Peggy Carter, just teasing her. But it was true. Diana hated being called little. Although she wasn't small, she had been drinking papaya juice every morning and night for months. Unfortunately, the increase was minimal, perhaps due to her natural build. Where's Schmidt's car? Colonel Chester Phillips finally found a chance to speak. Who? Schmidt's. Nonsense, that's obviously mine, Duke said forcefully. That's the reward for saving you. What? Want it back? Then I'll throw you down again and give you back the car? No, I didn't see the car or anything. Colonel Chester Phillips quickly waved his hand. He wasn't about to risk his life for a car, even if it was Schmidt's unique Hydra mount. Okay, that's settled. One car for both of your lives. Duke spread his wings again and flew off into the distance. I'll go and see if I can catch up with Steve. In a flash, he disappeared. He wasn't going to save Captain America, but to find the universal Rubik's Cube. Completing the task would allow him to draw a card. As for Captain America, Duke had thought it over. Everything depended on his own choices. After all, he had told him to remember to jump off the plane. See if he jumps or not. If he jumps, save him. Then heal Bucky and reunite the duo. Well, Cap actually loves his pal Bucky, not Peggy Carter. Otherwise, after waking up, he wouldn't even ask about Carter. Even if he thought she was dead, he should visit her grave, right? After all, before he fell into a deep sleep, he already thought that his friend's bones were gone, and Carter gave him a farewell kiss. The memory is still stuck in that period, so he should be looking for her. It is said that both old and new Steve have the same virtue. The old Steve took a bullet and then went to die. The new Steve was much more aggressive, only took a kiss, and then died too. As a result, both seem to be alive. Is it plagiarism? If the U.S. team still didn't jump off the plane as before, then he would choose to freeze Bucky so that the pair of friends could meet 70 years later. Of course, the choice is with Bucky. The two blinked. Shit, this speed is so fast, it looks on par with the Valkyrie, one of them remarked. Colonel, what now? Asked Peggy Carter. Clean up the mess and go back to headquarters, the driver replied, turning and walking back. Carter hurriedly followed. Although the speed of the Valkyrie is fast, we won't be able to reach New York in a while. We still have time. Soon, The battlefield was cleaned up, but the group did not return to the original headquarters. Instead, they occupied the center of Schmidt's base, as it could be directly connected with the Valkyrie. "I'm Steve Rogers. Anyone got it?" Peggy Carter hurriedly pushed Jim, a member of the Roaring Commando who was on the line, and picked it up herself. "Steve, is that you? Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine. It seems that the instructor did it," Steve replied. "Well, the instructor even ate your girlfriend's tofu." Peggy Carter had already started to call herself Captain America's girlfriend, although the two didn't really confess their love before they separated. "Is he on the Valkyrie?" Peggy Carter calmed down and asked, "Is the instructor on the way?" "No. If so, it probably hasn't arrived yet. The Valkyrie is going very fast. I guess the instructor can't catch up," said Steve. "Where's Schmidt?" she inquired. "Schmidt is dead," Steve answered. "Where's the plane?" she pressed further. "This is more difficult to explain," Steve admitted. "It is indeed more difficult to explain." Steve was flying the Valkyrie above the clouds, and a big hole was broken in the glass in front of the pilot's seat. Flying at super high speed, the wind pressure blowing in was extremely violent, and yet Steve could still breathe and talk? Indeed impressive. Ordinary people driving motorcycles at 60 miles per hour find it very difficult to breathe when facing strong winds. The altitude Steve was at least over 1,000 meters. The wind pressure of the ultra-high-speed flight, "Tell me the coordinates, and I'll find you a safe landing spot," Peggy Carter shouted. Steve hesitated. "Maybe there is no time to worry about safety," he finally said. And where was Duke at this time? He happened to catch the falling universal Rubik's Cube. End of this chapter. Chapter 87. Opening the Space Beacon. It is said that Duke was in a hurry, and he finally caught up with the Valkyrie. Still, he felt a bit empty. The ship was soaring too fast. In fact, he didn't care much whether Captain America could beat the Red Skull. Captain America and Schmidt were evenly matched, but resisting Thanos with both hands seemed a bit too much. It's just a routine of American blockbusters. If it were the Russian captain, Thanos would probably be defeated with just one look. Look at Bucky. He gets a 3-second shot, half of which is just him aiming with a gun. As for Captain America, it feels like he can fight Thanos evenly. Of course, picking up Thor's hammer is a completely different story. If Captain America loses to the Red Skull, it would prove that he doesn't have the protagonist life, and Duke could just go up and kill Schmidt himself. It was also a bit of a coincidence. Duke hurried on, and just as he approached the Valkyrie, he saw the cosmic cube fall down. Then he scanned the Valkyrie and saw only Captain America inside. He knew that Schmidt was probably unlucky enough to be sent over to guard the Soul Stone. Duke flew downward in a sloppy manner, finally holding the cosmic cube firmly in his hand. The next second, ding! It is detected that the host has obtained the cosmic cube, ready to open the space beacon. Opening. In his mind, Duke felt the veins of the Earth. To put it simply, it was the longitude and latitude map. Of course, because it had just been turned on, the map wasn't so clear. He subconsciously stopped in midair. If there were Google Maps during this period, those who often post Google Maps series videos on Station B would definitely find such an amazing picture. Somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, a person stood out of thin air above the sea with a pair of wings. What on earth is this? Man or bird? It would become a big puzzle in the world, and it might even be censored by Google Maps. Anyway, Duke had made it. Space beacon. What is that? Relying on the space beacon, the host can be teleported to any place as long as the host is strong enough. Is that so? Duke understood that the longitude and latitude map that was gradually becoming clear in his mind was the so-called space beacon. As long as he was strong enough, he could open a portal at any point on the Earth. He knew a kind of beacon magic before, but that kind of beacon was based on people or objects. For example, he was able to accurately teleport to the side of Captain America, who was drunk in the ruins bar, thanks to this. When he was at Camp Caspian, he positioned the beacon on Captain America, so he could teleport across the Atlantic from New York to Europe. However, this kind of beacon had limitations. It would disappear automatically after being used once, and could not be used continuously on human beings. With the current strength of Captain America, There was no burden on the beacon once, and it would not be noticed at all, but it would be crushed again. Well now, with the space beacon, he could go anywhere on the Earth without worrying about others. It's a pity that the space beacon here seemed to only belong to the Earth. Space beacon, can't it connect to other planets? Duke asked curiously. Host, you are thinking too far ahead. What? Host, please put away such unrealistic thoughts. Even if it is possible, with the current strength of the host, it is impossible to cross the dimensional space and open a portal on other planets. If the host insists on this, then please be prepared to become jerky. Cough, cough. Duke understood the meaning. It meant that he would exhaust not just his magic, but his life force as well. Then what if my strength becomes stronger? If the host's strength reaches demigod, and the demigod's attribute is space, then it can rely on physical strength to carry out short-distance, interstellar teleportation. Demigod, attribute. Lord of Fire, Ragnaros, is a demigod of fire. Alakir, the Wind Rider, is a demigod of wind. Neptulon, the Tide Hunter, is a demigod of water. And Mother of Stone, Selazane, is a demigod of earth. Understood, Duke muttered. Judging from the information indirectly revealed by the system, reaching the rank of demigod would be incredibly challenging. At the very least, one must find the most suitable attribute, or divine attribute, which in fantasy terms is referred to as a godhead. Medivh is an astral mage and an astral wanderer. He is the king of arcane arts. Judging from his current development trend, could it be that he is destined to become the king of magic? It seems a bit difficult. No wonder it took him only 100 years to advance to the level of demigod, and he couldn't progress any further in 400 years. Please ask the host to figure out the specific situation, the system prompted. Duke sighed. He loved his mother dearly, but this situation was frustrating. At least he could travel freely on Earth. As for interstellar travel, without a space beacon, it was impossible. If Doctor Strange had not been to Titan, he couldn't open a portal to Titan from Earth. But after visiting Titan, he could teleport back because of Earth's space beacon. Likewise, Duke faced similar constraints. Regarding the final battle and other portals, if you look carefully, you'll notice that other magicians assist Doctor Strange in opening the portals. It's not solely his power. As for impacting the demigod realm, that's a matter for later. Duke was only in the middle of the legendary rank, and the longitude and latitude map in his mind was still very vague. This spatial beacon wouldn't be fully operational for a while. It's fortunate that he was a legend. If he were still at the hero level, his mind would have been blown long ago. Congratulations to the host for completing the task, a reward for drawing a card. Do you want to draw now? The system asked. Wait, this is the end? Then, what about this thing? Duke was a little stunned. He took the Rubik's Cube, and that was it? He originally thought he would have to break it down like his neighbor next door. Did the neighbor break it down? He couldn't remember. The task has been completed. Please handle it, host, the system replied. Duke wanted to curse. This was a dilemma. According to the plot, should he give this thing to Colonel Phillips, the driver, or should he keep it himself? It was a hard choice. An angel on one shoulder, a devil on the other. If he didn't know what to do, there might be no Captain Marvel chapter, and Loki might come to attack Karazhan in Avengers 1. Trouble. If he gave it to the driver, he would be a little reluctant. After all, it was a space gem, one of the original stones of the universe. Researching it could potentially strengthen and enhance Karazhan's defense and attack power. But it might not be a good idea. If he really wanted to install the space gem, Karazhan might end up like the original version in Azeroth, connected to the nodes of every plane in the universe. Then there would be endless demon invasions and other planar creatures suddenly appearing. Forget about anything else, just in case Thanos was recruited. Oops, forgot about Steve, Duke exclaimed. End of this chapter. Chapter 88, Remember to Jump Off the Plane, means this. While chatting with the system, a sudden feeling of a thread breaking came to Duke's mind. He then yelled, Oops, I forgot about Steve. The broken line was the magic mark he had left on Steve's body. After a certain distance, the magic would dispel itself. What should I do? Duke muttered, feeling a bit helpless. It seemed that Bucky was really going to be frozen for 70 years. He just didn't know if Captain America had jumped off the plane or not. At this time, maybe I don't have time to worry about safety. I'm going to try to make a forced landing, Captain America said, looking at the radar weapon. I asked Howard to listen. He knows what to do. Peggy Carter said quickly, "There's no time. This plane is going too fast. It's heading to New York. I have to let it fall into the sea," Captain America decided. Upon hearing this, Peggy Carter suddenly panicked. "Wait, don't worry, Duke, isn't he?" "I didn't see the instructor. This plane is too fast. Schmidt has set up automatic flight, and I can't cancel it. Its speed is gradually accelerating, and the instructor may not be able to catch up," Captain America explained, wiping his eyes. It wasn't that he was crying. It was the wind blowing in from the window, making his eyes a little red. "I'm a soldier. This is my duty. The instructor has helped me 3 times today. This time, let me do it myself." Peggy Carter knew what Captain America wanted to do as soon as she heard it. She tried to dissuade him with red eyes. "Please, don't do this. There is still time. We can think of other ways." "I'm in no man's land," Captain America said, looking at the radar map. "If we don't act immediately, many people will die." "Peggy, this is my choice." Peggy Carter slowly closed her eyes, and a stream of crystal tears rolled down. Captain America took out the photo of his sweetheart to look at, then resolutely pushed the joystick. The Valkyrie plunged down like an eagle pouncing on a rabbit. "Peggy, I am here. It seems that I will dance with you another day." The Valkyrie crashed towards the ice on the sea surface at an extremely fast speed. "Well, next Saturday at the Stork Club. No problem. 8 o'clock sharp? Don't be late, understand?" "I still can't dance." Captain America gritted his teeth. The Valkyrie was getting closer and closer to the ice, and his heart began to beat more and more violently, feeling like it was going to exceed 120 beats per minute. "I will teach you. Just come. Remember to let the band play soft tunes. I don't want to step on your—" "Steve, Steve, Steve." Peggy's tears were pouring down. She had already guessed the ending of her sweetheart. Tears rolled down, her hands covered her face, and her shoulders shook helplessly. She was laughing, and she was also crying. It was hard to tell whether she was laughing or crying. She was laughing because they had won the war. Steve had succeeded. She was crying because they might never see each other again. Just when the Valkyrie was about to collide with the ice, a sentence suddenly popped up in Steve Rogers' mind. "Remember to jump off the plane." When he was in the laboratory, the instructor had given him the last class. At that time, he had no idea what this sentence meant. But now, he smiled wryly. "Remember to jump off the plane. So that's what it means?" Unfortunately, it was too late to react, and the Valkyrie was about to come into close contact with the ice. At the same time, he was also sighing in his heart. It turned out that the instructor had seen the ending of this moment in the time stream a long time ago. That's why he told him to remember to jump off the plane. The instructor is really... The next moment, there was a violent impact and collision. The body trembled suddenly and flew out to the side uncontrollably. His ears were full of the clicking sound of steel and ice colliding. Then, his eyes went dark, his mind sank, and he fell asleep complete. Ellie. The ice. The ice layer cracked from the impact, and the broken Valkyrie sank bit by bit. The strong wind mixed with the blizzard, gradually submerging, swallowing, and freezing it. From a distance, it seemed as if this plane had never existed in this world. Captain America Steve Rogers fell asleep for nearly 70 years. Meanwhile, Duke stood at a high altitude somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean. He frowned, curled his lips, and opened a portal. 500 feet below the Alps, at Hydra's final base, Colonel Chester Phillips was explaining the follow-up work when suddenly a white portal opened nearby, startling him. Duke walked out slowly. "Well, this new ability isn't bad," Duke remarked, satisfied with his return. "Duke, why are you back? Where is Rogers?" Colonel Phillips asked urgently. "I was about to ask you the same thing. How is he doing? Has he contacted you?" Duke feigned ignorance. "Rogers, I'm afraid." The colonel sighed. He was piloting the Valkyrie and made an emergency landing in the sea. The outcome was already clear. "I didn't catch up with him. When I reached the Atlantic Ocean, the tracking mark was disconnected," Duke shrugged, looking helpless. "Disconnected? Yes, this kind of magic has a distance limit. Alas, the colonel sighed, shaking his head in resignation. It wasn't Duke's fault. The Valkyrie was incredibly fast. Duke had flown quickly, but saving Peggy Carter and others had caused a delay. Ultimately, it was Roger's own choice. By the way, where's Peggy Carter? Duke asked. In the central control room, the colonel pointed, but I think you should avoid going there. She's crying. What are you afraid of? She can't beat me, Duke said, walking towards the control room. The colonel wanted to stop him, but reconsidered, instructing his men, no matter what happens, don't interfere. Although Peggy Carter was an excellent agent with sound judgment, she was also a woman who had just lost her boyfriend. Duke might become a target for her grief. If it were him, he would blame Duke for not catching up in time. But if Duke hadn't saved them, there wouldn't have been a delay. Is she crying? Duke wondered as he entered the control room, quietly casting a spell. The voice was very familiar. Peggy Carter's body trembled, and she turned with red eyes. Didn't catch up, she asked. I thought you would just stand up and hit me, Duke smiled. I've heard what Colonel Phillips said. I'm sorry, but I lost track of the target halfway through the chase. Hit you? Why should I hit you? Peggy Carter wiped her tears. She had considered beating up Duke and asking why he didn't catch up, but seeing him in front of her, the thought vanished. Schmidt's affairs had nothing to do with Duke. He had volunteered to help and saved her life. Blaming him was unreasonable. Then what if I tell you that Steve Rogers is still alive? Duke suddenly grinned mischievously. Those who knew him well would recognize this smile as a sign he was about to stir things up. What? Peggy Carter stood up abruptly. Many people say that my writing skills are not good, and I do not deny this. Although I have been writing books for many years, I have never practiced specifically for writing. In fact, I can't practice writing for a while. I just rely on a lot of writing, and I have always focused on brisk, urban, and two-dimensional writing. This type of book emphasizes conception and storytelling, followed by writing. Except for fantasy, history, suspense, etc., most other writing requirements are not high. But I wrote it down, and I will pay more attention to writing in the future. End of this chapter. Chapter 89, 70 Years of Waiting. How is this possible? No, is this true? Peggy Carter's voice trembled as she watched the Valkyrie crash into the icy surface. There was no way Steve could have survived. Although she desperately wanted him to live, she knew it was impossible. Unless, by some miracle, there was a boat nearby, but that seemed highly unlikely. The search that would continue for several years was nothing more than a quest to find his corpse. Duke didn't answer Peggy's question directly. Instead, he focused on the combat map next to him, a small beeping sound punctuating the silence. To be honest, I wonder how Schmidt managed to fly this thing. It seems like he's heading towards the North Pole. Peggy Carter looked puzzled. Duke didn't elaborate further. He had found it strange when he first watched Captain America: The First Avenger. When Steve was piloting the Valkyrie, the radar clearly showed the Great Lakes of North America, the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and Newfoundland. In the next second, the map shifted to show the Valkyrie's position, indicating it was flying north towards New York, or at least north by east. The last Hydra base was supposed to be in the Alps, Western Europe. It would have made more sense to fly directly across the Atlantic Ocean to New York. Why fly north and then south from the North Pole? Was it to confuse the enemy's judgment? Duke didn't know. Anyway, he had chased the Valkyrie north, but when he sensed the target heading south, he flew directly across the Atlantic Ocean. When the Tesseract fell into the sea, he managed to intercept it. However, identifying the exact location on the vast sea was a different challenge. The map in Captain America: The First Avenger was abstract, distorted, and deformed, making it difficult to determine whether the Valkyrie was flying north or south. Duke could roughly determine the crash location of the Valkyrie: the Labrador Peninsula, Baffin Island, or Greenland. He believed Baffin Island was the most likely, followed by the Labrador Peninsula, and finally Greenland. How do you know he's still alive? Peggy asked again, her voice tinged with hope. This time, Duke didn't ignore her, because I saw him in the time stream 70 years later. 70 years. Peggy gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief. Duke had been hesitant about whether to save Captain America. He had finally decided to let events follow their original course. Although he had identified 3 possible crash sites, it was still a rough judgment. The radar map had moved too quickly to pinpoint the exact location. Even if Captain America was in one of those 3 places, finding him would be incredibly difficult. Magic wasn't a solution to everything. The areas were all windy and snowy, and a blizzard could cover the Valkyrie's traces in just a few hours. It would be nearly impossible to see anything in such weather. And even if he did save Steve, what kind of life would Captain America have? Fighting Hydra, performing missions, and being subjected to blood tests to crack the super soldier serum, he would be treated as a tool. In an alternate version of events, Steve didn't go into hibernation. He married his first love, Peggy Carter, and continued to perform missions, even settling in South Korea for a while. They had a daughter, Sharon Rogers, not Sharon Carter. After retiring, Sharon took up the mantle of Captain America, becoming the 2nd generation to save the world. But what about Bucky? What about Falcon? Everything would be thrown into chaos. After a moment of hesitation, Duke decided to let Captain America become a popsicle. Although fighting Hydra and being used for blood tests wasn't ideal, it was probably not an unacceptable fate for Steve. But 70 years. How is this possible? Peggy Carter staggered and sat back weakly in her chair. You seem to have forgotten that he was transformed by Dr. Erskine's serum. As a super soldier, his metabolic function is several times that of ordinary people. He could have been frozen in a fake death state for decades and then resurrected again. According to Dr. Erskine, the serum can also slow down his aging process. So it's not impossible, Duke explained, pulling the dead Dr. Erskine into the conversation to take the blame. Of course, this is assuming he didn't fall into the sea. Do you think he fell into the sea? Well, is he that stupid? Compared to falling into the sea, the possibility of surviving after hitting the ice is greater. Duke added. Peggy Carter remained silent, lost in thought. Do you want to wait for him? Duke asked, showing a devilish smile. He was curious to see if the love and loyalty between Captain America and Carter could last for 70 years. Well, mainly to see Carter's reaction. 70 years. Even if I'm still alive, I'll be too old, right? Peggy Carter touched her face and let out a long sigh. Well, it may be 70 years, it may be 65 years, or it may be 60 years. After all, the future is not so easy to predict, but the time frame is probably around that, Duke said. Peggy Carter remained silent, contemplating the enormity of the situation. Oh, by the way, don't worry about becoming the youngest. As long as you don't die, I can restore you to your youthful state, Duke smiled. Peggy Carter's body shook violently, and she looked at Duke in fear. You're simply a devil, a devil! He had given her hope, but with such a long time span. 70 years. Even if it was 60 years, half a century would have passed. Would she stay alone for 60 years? That would be like living as a widow. Some people speculated that Peggy Carter's child was actually fathered by Captain America when he traveled back in time, because there was no husband in the photo. Regardless of whether it was true or not, there was no time travel at this moment. Duke wouldn't give Thanos a chance. He wanted to see if Peggy Carter could wait for Captain America for 70 years. It was a cruel curiosity. Of course, this seemed unfair to Peggy Carter, so Duke looked at the combat map next to him, drew 3 large circles on it with a pen, marking Labrador Peninsula, Baffin Island, Greenland, and the sea area around the 3 islands. After all, Captain America might not have hit the land. There was a certain possibility he had hit the huge ice floes scattered on the sea. It is very likely that he crashed in these 3 areas. Whether you can find him or not depends on you, Duke said. Looking at the 3 huge islands, Peggy Carter was in a daze, not knowing what to think. Duke didn't bother her further. He opened a portal and left. As for the cosmic cube, he decided it was better to collect it himself. End of this chapter. Chapter 90, Bucky in the Heroism version. Back in Karazhan, Duke went directly to Dr. Erskine. How's the situation? Duke asked. It's not very ideal, Dr. Erskine replied. There are multiple fractures, various degrees of organ damage, and several important nerves are broken. The main issue is that the heart vessel is seriously damaged. I have treated it in time, and the broken bones have been connected, but the internal organs need long-term conditioning. As for the broken nerves, I can't do anything about it. It's not my specialty. As he spoke, Dr. Erskine seemed to remember something. By the way, immature super soldier serum was detected in his body. Huh? If I guess correctly, it should have been injected by Dr. Zola, right? Duke inquired. If the serum hadn't been activated at the last moment, his life would have been lost, Dr. Erskine said. That's when Bucky woke up. Where am I? My hand, Bucky mumbled. The anesthetics couldn't counteract the body's reaction after strengthening. Bucky just woke up and noticed his missing left arm. He gradually remembered falling off the train. I actually didn't die? Looking at his left arm, he smiled wryly. The price of an arm. You should thank Dr. Zola. If he hadn't injected you with serum, you would have been broken, Duke said. You are? Bucky asked, still disoriented. Duke, this is my home, Duke replied. This name, I remember, Steve mentioned it to me. His instructor's name is this, Bucky said, gritting his teeth. If nothing else, the Duke he was talking about is me, Duke confirmed. Really? It seems that you saved me. Cough, cough. Where is Steve? Was our mission successful? Bucky asked. Successful. Schmidt is dead, Duke said, then added in his heart. Is he really dead? Cough. It seems that I missed a lot of things. Bucky coughed lightly and asked again. Where's Steve? He's missing, Duke said. Bucky's eyes gradually widened. No, it's impossible. How could that bastard? He defeated Schmidt, drove Schmidt's bomber, and crashed into the ice. The exact location of the crash cannot be traced for the time being. Howard and the others are following the signal before the crash, but the situation is not very optimistic, Duke explained. Then with a slight smile, he added, Of course, I know he's not dead. Bucky coughed again, this time more violently. You, cough, cuff, how do you know? Didn't your friend tell you who I am? Duke asked. Bucky shook his head. That's not true. He just said, Ahem, you are very good. Yan, Duke called out, turning his head. Then, amidst Bucky's widened, stunned gaze, a beautiful, indescribably beautiful woman walked in. To be precise, she was floating. No, she was flying in, and she continued to float, suspended in midair. This is an angel, right? Bucky quickly turned his head away, a little afraid to look directly at her. Different skin colors, nationalities, and countries have different aesthetics for beauty, but there is no truth to the rumor that Europeans and Americans are blind when they see Chinese faces. As for the aesthetics of the advanced face, this can be ignored directly. However, it is undeniable that there are some differences. For example, Peggy Carter, a typical European and American girl with a big frame and a strong physique, is not considered good-looking in the eyes of many people, but Duke thinks she is okay. This is a slight difference in aesthetics. However, when the beauty reaches a certain level, this difference disappears, such as with the current Yan Lingji, simply beautifully effervescent. Except for those extremely perverted people, basically no one would call her ugly. Heal him, Duke instructed. Ah, Yan Lingji responded. Seeing no movement, Bucky floated up into the air. He opened his eyes wide, watching himself being entangled and wrapped up by the water flow, which finally turned into a big ball to seal him shut. But the strange thing was that he didn't feel suffocation, and when he waved his hand, it really felt like water. He knew that it was. The procedure was performed by a woman named Yan. Strangely, despite her name, which means flame, she didn't use fire. Instead, Bucky noticed strands of red threads in the water, which began to penetrate his body through his pores, causing him severe pain. Bucky tried to scream, shaking his head violently, but only the sound of water bubbling escaped his lips. He could feel something inside him being connected, though he didn't know what it was. The pain was unbearable, and he nearly fainted. If it weren't for his pride as a hero and the presence of the beautiful woman, he might have lost consciousness. The presence of the beauty beside him made his hormones surge, and he was determined not to lose face. After about 10 minutes, the water sphere dispersed, and Bucky collapsed onto the medical bed with a thud. He quickly sat up, exclaiming, "My waist, huh?" To his surprise, his body had almost fully recovered, and his right arm felt strong again. The nerve that had been severed seemed to be reconnected. "It looks like I'm going to lose my job," Dr. Erskine said with a wry smile, shaking his head in self-mockery. Yan Lingji, looking a bit tired after casting the water sphere, was told to rest. "Go and rest first," Duke instructed. "Well, then I'll go down first," she replied. As a water elemental spirit, Yanlingji already possessed healing abilities. Combined with the life force of the red dragon, her healing powers had reached a new level. Although she had consumed some elemental power, she could quickly recover by absorbing the surrounding water elemental energy. Watching Yanlingji leave, Duke pouted. Her temperament didn't quite match the fiery nature of her name. While she could be tender, she lacked a certain demonic quality. It was a pity that her water element had such a soft temperament. The fire element was irritable, the earth element was honest and steadfast, and the wind element was insolent. None of the elemental spirits had a personality similar to Yanlingji's. "Now you know who I am?" Duke asked with a kind smile. I think so," Bucky replied, still speechless. Duke waved his hand dismissively. "Anyway, you just need to know that I have the ability to see the future." "Wait, you said the future?" Bucky asked, confused. Duke continued to fool Bucky in the same way he had fooled the U.S. team. 5 minutes later, he presented Bucky with 2 choices. "Now you have 2 choices. One is that I cure you, and you go back to the team to find your good friend. The other is that I cure you and freeze you for 70 years. Choose one." Bucky was left speechless. End of this chapter. Chapter 91. Sanjiang's Testimonials. This marks my first time being featured in Sanjiang, and I must admit, I'm a bit excited. I owe a great deal of gratitude to my editor for the continuous support and recommendations along the way. I vaguely recall that back in 2010, Chidian allowed authors to apply for Sanjiang on their own. At that time, I was writing my first book, a fantasy novel. Naively, I applied to Sanjiang, but of course, I was rejected. The lofty ambitions I had were quickly dashed, and my enthusiasm waned. After graduating in 2011, I found myself too busy to continue writing that fantasy novel. In fact, I can't even remember its title now. It wasn't until the end of 2011 that I picked up writing again. Fast forward to 2019, and I've been writing for 8 years straight. Sanjiang feels like a form of recognition. Although my writing skills are still not where I'd like them to be, I continue to improve. I'm not naturally talented, nor am I a literary scholar. My progress comes from the slow accumulation of experience, book after book. In conclusion, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to my dear editor. Zhu, no more words. It's time to get back to writing. Let's do this, Ollie. Chapter 92. Bucky in the Hyodo Issei version. Bucky was confused. According to Duke, Steve would be frozen in suspended animation for close to 70 years in a certain ice formation before being rescued. 70 years? This is not something that can be passed in a single sleep. Compared to Peggy Carter, he had to believe more because he had just experienced it. He fell off a 100-meter-high cliff, hit numerous rocks, and finally fell heavily on the snow, breaking his arm. He survived the freezing environment, heavy bleeding, and numerous internal and external injuries. It sounded like the serum injected by Zola was still incomplete, while Steve had a mature serum. If he could survive, Steve should be fine too. Fake death, frozen for 70 years, although it sounds a bit mysterious, is not impossible if you think about it carefully. But he also couldn't fully trust Duke's words, even though it seemed there was no conflict of interest between them, and Duke had no reason to harm him. In other words, even if someone really wanted to harm him, it wouldn't be worthwhile to go to such lengths because he was no match for Duke at all. "But I still want to find Steve," Bucky said, looking up. "Decided?" Duke asked. "Yes, no matter what. I want to search for myself, instead of not even trying and just waiting 70 years, Bucky said firmly. I really wanted to applaud him. He is indeed a good friend. "Okay, I respect your choice," Duke nodded, "but I can practice magic at any time, and it is possible to meditate for several years. Are you sure? Because if you choose this path, you will have to search for countless years, and when you want to come back to find me again, I may be on the way to practice, so I can't freeze you." That's right. Duke received a promotion notice from the system again. After getting the universal Rubik's Cube, he got a huge amount of talent points, surpassing the points of Ares, the god of war. The system notification was to sleep, but Duke decided not to sleep for the time being. He wanted to spend time with Diana and not just wake up and turn around the world. The earth can turn without him. Bucky was dumbfounded again. Doesn't that mean that he has to miss his friends? When he was very old, Steve would appear in front of him. He would be old and dying, but Steve would still be a handsome guy. Thinking about that scene, he felt a chill. "Boss, it's not difficult. I can create an ice trap," Dr. Erskine said. "Is that so? That's fine. When you feel tired, you can go to Heaven's Kitchen to find Samir," Duke said. Although he didn't want to be so troublesome, he still respected Bucky's choice. "It turned out to be you." Bucky froze for a moment. People who live in New York naturally know the place Heaven's Kitchen. Although Bucky was still a 4- or 5-year-old kid at the time when Hell's Kitchen changed, he didn't have much memory, but the previous generation couldn't stop talking about it. "How's his arm? Can it be reattached?" Duke turned to look at Dr. Erskine. "No, his arm was not severed with a knife, but fell into 2 pieces. A small piece of bone and muscle is missing at the cut." Dr. Erskine shook his head. Looking at the severed arm soaked in the special medicinal solution, Duke curled his lips. "That is to say, if you really want to reattach it, it will be shorter by a few centimeters." Sweat formed on Dr. Erskine's head. "You can also understand it that way." Bucky also had a black thread on one end. "Could this thing be forced on?" "Are you kidding me? Do you want to install a mechanical arm on him again?" After thinking for a while, Duke took out a mana ruby. "Did it hurt just now?" Duke asked. "Ah?" Bucky was stunned for a moment, then realized that he meant the treatment session, and nodded. "Of course. The current one will hurt even more, but it will connect your arm and give you the power of the Red Dragon arm at the same time. Do you want to?" "Huh?" Bucky continued to be bewildered. "What the hell? Is the Red Dragon arm ready?" Bucky asked, his voice trembling with uncertainty. Although he didn't fully understand what the Red Dragon arm entailed, he knew it had to be something significant. "It will hurt a lot, and you must endure it. You can't faint, or all our previous efforts will be wasted," Duke warned. Bucky nodded, albeit hesitantly. He was clearly apprehensive, but willing to go through with it. "Put a piece of cloth in his mouth so he doesn't bite his tongue, and secure him tightly," Duke instructed. Dr. Erskine quickly found a piece of red cloth, stuffed it into Bucky's mouth, and then began to secure his limbs and body. The cloth was soon soaked with Bucky's blood, the metallic scent mingling with the sharp odor of medicinal herbs. "Let's begin," Duke said, as he carefully removed the severed arm from a special medicinal solution. He aligned it with Bucky's stump, trying to find the correct angle. "Is this right?" Duke asked, turning to Dr. Erskine. "It should be a little further out," Dr. Erskine replied, adjusting the arm by about 5 millimeters. "We're missing about 2 centimeters of bone," he noted with a shrug. "All right, remember, don't pass out," Duke reminded Bucky. Bucky bit down hard on the cloth and nodded, his eyes wide with fear. The next moment, his veins bulged as the pain hit him like a tidal wave. It was far worse than anything he had experienced before. Duke inserted a mana ruby into the missing section of Bucky's arm, at the junction of the broken bones. He then began to carve intricate spells and dark runes onto Bucky's arm, sealing in his life force. A purple arcane light glowed in Duke's hand, illuminating the room. Among the 3 cultivators, arcane magic was the core and driving force, connecting the elements of fire and ice. The expansion of arcane circuits would inevitably increase the casting speed of flames and the damage of ice. Under the guidance of the arcane, the power of the mana ruby spread out completely. It not only contained life force, but also the powerful magic of the Red Dragon. The ruby spread like liquid, connecting the 2 broken arm bones and rapidly regenerating muscle, shaping bone, and connecting nerves. Bucky felt as if he was being crushed, stretched, torn apart, and reassembled all at once. The pain was excruciating, and he was on the verge of losing consciousness. Bloodshot eyes oozed from the corners of his eyes, and veins bulged on his forehead and neck. Despite the restraints, he struggled violently. Fortunately, the transformation of the mana ruby was swift. Under Duke's arcane guidance and Dr. Erskine's astonished gaze, Bucky's left arm quickly turned crimson, covered with hard, crocodile-like scales. His hand morphed into a sharp dragon claw. The Red Dragon arm was born. Duke stared at the transformed Bucky in shock. Wasn't this Issei Hyodo, the protagonist from High School DxD? End of this chapter. Chapter 93. Why is Wang 8's shell so hard? A black thread of frustration appeared on Duke's forehead. Hyudo Issei had the Securite Drag lodged in his left hand, which transformed into a dragon hand encased in armor when activated. Bucky, on the other hand, had a completely red dragon arm made of carbon-based life. Though it was made of flesh, it was undeniably a dragon's arm, incredibly hard and formidable. Duke felt a bit uneasy. Hyudo Issei had opened the path to a harem after acquiring his dragon hand. Bucky, with his left-handed red dragon arm, seemed to be on a similar trajectory. Did this mean he also wanted to? This? Bucky stammered, still bewildered by his new dragon claw. He hadn't yet realized that he now had the potential to open a harem. Staring at his scaled arm and sharp dragon claws, Bucky swallowed hard. Had he turned into a monster? Well, not bad, Duke said, clapping his hands. Thankfully, Bucky's transformation wasn't as grotesque as William Birkin's G2 form in Resident Evil, where a massive arm supported a person. Bucky's left arm had turned into a red dragon arm, similar to Natsu's half-dragon transformation. The growth of his left arm was limited, only about 10% larger than his right arm. The proportions were balanced, and there was no significant sense of imbalance or awkwardness. Try the effect, Duke instructed, waving his hand. The scene before everyone's eyes shifted, and they found themselves in a martial arts arena. A tinkling sound echoed through the space. Doubtson Carlos, a frequent visitor to the martial arts arena, seemed more interested in improving her swordsmanship than going out to experience life like Diana. Of course, she did go out occasionally, but she spent most of her time in Karajan. Carlos, Duke called from a distance. What's wrong? Carlos put down her practice sword and walked over slowly. Who is this person? He looks strange. Is he a demon? It's Bucky, but don't read it backwards, Duke said with a playful smile. K8? Carlos asked, confused. Duke frowned. He had used English just now, and Bucky in English really did sound like that when reversed. In Chinese it's Bucky. Bucky, Ki. Carlos didn't understand at first, but then she got it and glared at Duke. When Diana comes back, I'm going to tell her that you were teasing me. Duke shrugged indifferently. Bucky, this is Doubtson Carlos, he introduced. Carlos, try him for me. Don't be afraid of accidents. Hit hard. Huh? She's a girl. Bucky was stunned. Although he didn't have Sanji's strict code of not hitting women, he still felt it was inappropriate to let a man compete with a woman. Additionally, he was genuinely afraid of hurting Carlos. However, this comment annoyed Doubtson Carlos. Having left Paradise Island 25 years ago, she was unaware of the outside world's discrimination against women, which was one reason she didn't like going out much. Hearing herself being underestimated again, she was immediately angered. Ha! She vanished into the shadows and suddenly appeared in front of Bucky, her two long swords cutting towards him like scissors. Bucky was startled. He never expected this woman to be so fierce. But considering the people who appeared in this place, none of them could be ordinary. Well, except for Dr. Erskine, who seemed like an ordinary man. But Bucky didn't have time to think about it. The pair of swords formed a cross and slashed towards him. He quickly flipped backward and rolled out of the way. Carlos pursued him relentlessly. She twirled her swords, holding them behind her as she stabbed down at Bucky. It was clear she wouldn't stop until she had pierced him through. This woman is too fierce, Bucky thought. He continued to evade, unsure if his new red dragon arms could block these sharp swords. Do you just hide? Carlos taunted. I'm a good man and don't fight with women. Don't force me, Bucky replied, still dodging her attacks. I forced it. What can you do? Carlos taunted as he leaped forward, his hands positioned with his left hand forward and his right hand back. This pose, not good. As Bucky feared, Carlos didn't slash at him directly, but instead began spinning at high speed. The front and rear swords whirled like a circular saw, moving so fast that there was no room to dodge. Bucky gritted his teeth and raised his left dragon claw to block the attack. Clang, clang, clang. The ear-piercing sound of clashing metal filled the air. To Bucky's surprise, his red dragon arm successfully blocked Carlos's double swords without any pain. The dragon scale seemed indestructible, giving him newfound confidence. Drink, Bucky yelled, swinging his left arm and throwing Carlos, who was cutting at high speed, away. However, Carlos managed to kick Bucky 3 times in the chest while in midair. Both fighters flew back, landing hard. At this moment, Bucky was not yet the fierce and experienced Winter Soldier of later years. Apart from his serum-enhanced body and the red dragon arm, his fighting experience was limited to basic army combat skills. Bucky excelled in long-range sniping, not close combat. When the U.S. team took down the Hydra stronghold, he served as a sniper. Carlos, on the other hand, was an Amazon warrior from Paradise Island with years of combat experience far surpassing Bucky's. Even while being thrown, Carlos managed to land 3 heavy kicks. Bucky, still recovering from his injuries, spat out blood after the kicks. Without the red dragon arm, he wouldn't have been able to get up. The red dragon arm not only increased the combat power of his left arm, but also enhanced his overall strength by about 20 to 30%. "No more fights. This is not fair," Carlos shouted angrily, throwing away his broken sword. "Why is that bastard so hard?" Duke smiled and said, "I'll get you 2 purple suits later. You can spend your talent points." "Thanks. By the way, what is that thing?" "It's too strong. I guess it needs Diana's god-killing sword to split it." Although Carlos didn't fully understand what a purple dress was, Duke explained, "The red dragon essence is condensed after the death of an ancient dragon, at least 10,000 years old. The ruby crystal can only be made by adult dragons around 5,000 years old. The mana ruby in Bucky's left arm is the condensed magic power of a young dragon over 1,000 years old. The mana essence is from young dragons hundreds of years old. The power of a millennium red dragon, even if not all of it, is formidable. How could Carlos's fine steel sword cut through it?" "Bucky, you should stay here for a month to recuperate and adapt to the red dragon arm," Duke advised. Wait a minute. Will it always be like this?" Bucky asked, holding up his exaggerated red dragon claw with a constipated expression. If it couldn't change, he would have to wrap it up to avoid scaring children. It should be able to change freely. You should get familiar with it first. "Oh." Bucky finally breathed a sigh of relief. End of this chapter. Chapter 94. The Departure and the Debt. Bucky didn't stay for a full month. After about 20 days, feeling almost fully recovered, he decided to leave. No sooner had Bucky left than a debt came knocking at Duke's door. Howard Stark, his big nephew. "Looking at your unlucky appearance, I can tell you haven't found anyone. Why did you come to me?" Duke asked, making a cup of Lapsang Souchong tea. "How about this?" "Uncle Duke, you've changed your taste?" Howard inquired. "I like to try everything," Duke replied. "I don't just drink green tea. I also enjoy black tea, white tea, yellow tea, and even scented tea." Howard took a sip, but quickly put the cup down, his melancholy expression clearly not related to the tea. "Why the long face? What's on your mind? Tell me," Duke urged. "Uncle Duke, I've always been curious why you chose Steve Rogers, but then let him be frozen for 70 years, Howard finally said, revealing his true intention. "If you had taken a fancy to someone, wouldn't you cultivate them carefully? You trained him, but when he had an accident, you, his half-master, just ignored it?" "Hey, what do you mean I let him be frozen for 70 years? I didn't do that. Don't talk nonsense," Duke retorted. Howard smiled wryly. "Uncle Duke, don't fool me. Don't fool me. Tell me your real reason for coming," Duke said, glancing at him with a playful smirk. "Ahem, you caught me," Howard coughed softly, embarrassed. He hadn't come for Steve. After half a month of search and rescue, there was still no trace of Steve. Based on the information Duke had left, they chose the Labrador Peninsula closest to New York. Starting from New York, it took half a month to check the coastline of the Labrador Peninsula, but they found nothing. The mountains were covered in heavy snow, making it difficult for the search and rescue personnel to see clearly. With the current technological means, searching in this icy and snowy world was challenging, relying heavily on manpower. The aircraft technology of the time struggled to navigate in strong winds and snow. Even in clear weather, human eyes were needed to identify and search. Therefore, they had to rely on ships to wander near the coastline and then send people to the island to search. It was time-consuming and labor-intensive, with little reward. Howard wasn't there for Cap. Others were searching for him. He was there for something else. "Hey, Uncle Duke, is the universal Rubik's Cube in your possession?" Howard asked, revealing his true purpose. When confiscating Hydra's properties, they had discovered records of the universal Rubik's Cube. Duke glanced at him. "Yes, it's in my hands." Howard was left embarrassed. Why did the universal Rubik's Cube end up in the hands of S. Shield, and who informed the Strategic Science Reserve of its existence? Duke was curious. Before this, they shouldn't have known about Hydra's secret weapon. The only one who had seen it was Captain America, so did he tell them? But judging from Avengers 1, this seemed unlikely. After Captain America's crash, Howard Stark should have been looking for him and the wreckage of the plane based on the signal from the universal Rubik's Cube. However, they only found the Rubik's Cube. The signal was cut off, and they couldn't find Captain America afterward. Therefore, no one should have informed the Strategic Science Reserve of Hydra's secret weapon, but Howard had picked it up based on the outgoing signal. Most of them still didn't know the secret of the Rubik's Cube in the universe. With a sigh, Howard said, "The Strategic Science Reserve will be reorganized soon, and I believe the universal Rubik's Cube is the key to humanity's development and utilization of sustainable energy. This is what the world needs. With it, science can make a triple jump." "So, you want to take it from me?" Duke asked. Borrow it," Howard smiled sheepishly. He wouldn't say anything. This matter should be left to the country's officials to discuss. "Did old man Philip send you here?" "Ahem, really, you can't hide anything from Uncle Duke." Duke didn't respond immediately. He took a slow sip of black tea, contemplating the series of reactions that might be triggered after the disappearance of the Rubik's Cube. First, let's sort out the timeline of the Rubik's Cube. 1. A long time ago, Odin left it on Earth. 2. After many years and unknown changes of hands, it was discovered by Red Skull Schmidt. 3. The Rubik's Cube then sank into the sea. 4. Howard Stark found and salvaged it. 5. The Rubik's Cube was then collected by S. Shield. 6. The Kree studied the Rubik's Cube. 7. The Sky Team and others discovered the Rubik's Cube, and the Orange Cat swallowed it. 8. The team went back to fight the Orange Cat and retrieved it. 9. S.H.I.E.L.D. continued to study the Rubik's Cube. 10. Loki's invasion occurred. 11. The Battle of New York ended, and the Rubik's Cube was returned to Odin's treasury. 12. It was handed over to Thanos, who used it to destroy half of all life. This is the original main timeline. The branch line is 1. The Battle of New York ends. 2. Loki flees with the Rubik's Cube. After reunion, the U.S. team returned the Infinity Gems to their respective points in time. This means that, in the main timeline, there are no more Infinity Gems. If Duke now collects the Space Gem, then S.H.I.E.L.D. will not be able to study it. The Kree will not discover it, which means it won't attract the attention of Captain Marvel, and Loki, who later realizes that the Space Gem is on Earth, will also be unaware. With Karajan's powerful isolation ability, it is estimated that the Kree, Captain Marvel, and Loki will not notice its traces. Even Thanos couldn't detect the whereabouts of the Space Gem. It would be as if Odin left it on Earth and then it disappeared. Leaving aside the Kree, Captain Marvel, Loki, and Thanos, without the Space Gem, it is likely that S.H.I.E.L.D. would not have the advanced technologies that followed. Granted, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s technology was built on the remnants of the Red Skull's Hydra, but the Space Stone still played a significant role. If it disappears, the subsequent plot will be altered. Of course, these are not the most important considerations. The crucial point is that Duke found it difficult to use the Space Gem to further strengthen Karajan. According to a comprehensive system evaluation, if the Space Gem is used, it could potentially blow Karajan into the crack of the universe. At the very least, like the original version of Karajan, it would be connected to countless cosmic plane nodes, leading to endless plane creatures invading. Duke has always preferred to avoid unnecessary trouble. Although the Space Gem can indeed strengthen Karajan, he dislikes the potential complications even more. Holding it in his hand, at most, it would be used as a magic weapon like the Eye of Agamotto. While it can enhance his strength, it is not as powerful as imagined and feels somewhat redundant. After considering everything, Duke nodded and agreed. "I'll pick it up in a month." "Really? Thank you, Uncle Duke." "Now hurry up and get out. Your smug face is annoying me." Howard smiled, picked up his cup, and drank it down. The black tea was so delicious. Thanks to Kang for the 5,000 rewards. End of this chapter. Chapter 95. the bald professor at the age of 13. In fact, using the space gem to strengthen Karazhan can only be seen as adding icing on the cake. It doesn't provide substantial help. The power of space already exists in Karazhan. The black dragon essence controls the power of the earth, and the earth is a form of space. Although the bronze dragon essence controls time, the body of the bronze dragon is made of special sand, the sand of time. Therefore, the space gem can only enhance what is already there. A month later, Howard came to take away the Rubik's Cube, and thus the trajectory of events was restored. The system notified Duke that he was ready to advance. However, Duke intended to set aside a year to accompany Diana. He couldn't always be a passive toolman, could he? During this year, he would give Diana whatever she wanted. Even if she asked him to accompany her to school, Duke would grit his teeth and agree. In the materialistic world of the United States, as long as you have money, you can do anything. Admission to a school wasn't difficult. Of course, after a year, he would just need to find a way to transfer to another school. After World War II ended, Duke accompanied Leon back to Stone City. He knew that Leon had been thinking about that place all the time and wanted to go back and have a look. Fortunately, her wish was fulfilled. Due to Leon's desperate efforts, the Japanese army's original plan was severely frustrated, and they were unable to continue their southward march. It was also because of Leon's actions that Japan surrendered early. Of course, the nuclear bomb in the United States still played a significant role, but it wasn't the little boy bomb, it was the fat man. Duke found this twist quite surprising. After that, there was a civil war, and Duke didn't want to get involved in his own people fighting against each other. 8 years passed, and at the moment the instrument of surrender was signed, Stone City was empty. Everyone had gone to the Lotus Fairy Temple to offer incense and pray. Duke performed a small miracle and granted the wishes of several praying people, making the Lotus Fairy Temple even more popular. Lion was very happy and cried, though she felt a bit awkward. The people of Stone City wanted to build a golden statue for her, which made her feel uncomfortable. When she had just died, her body was nourished by the power of the red dragon because she wore the ruby crystal all the time. This slowed down the decay process significantly, but it would still decay slowly unless another crystal was used. Lion didn't want to be gilded or molded into a golden statue. It felt very awkward to her. So Duke carved spells around her body, stopping the decay. At the same time, he secretly issued an oracle, and the common people gave up the idea of sculpting a golden statue. If it wasn't for worrying about causing trouble, Leon would have wanted to bring her body back a long time ago. "How about I make a fake one?" Duke asked. "Forget it. I don't want it anymore. After all, I have lived here for more than 10 years, and I have feelings for this place. Let my body sleep here forever," Leon said, wiping away her tears. The soul body also has tears, but not in the conventional sense. The tears on her face just said, "Let's go, Master." "Okay," Duke replied. Putting an end to Leon's concern, Duke opened a portal and returned to Karazhan. After spending a year with Diana, Duke fell into a sleep again, and his consciousness entered the astral world. Karazhan once again disappeared from everyone's sight, shocking all of New York. In a grand mansion in Westchester, as a neighbor, Brian Xavier had just driven home. His eyes widened as he watched the gradually disappearing Karazhan. "Disappeared again?" he exclaimed. He excitedly ran to the neighborhood 10 miles away, only to find that the original open space was really gone, and the entire area was once again covered by dense green forest. Brian wanted to rush in, but found himself walking out of the woods without any success. Brian continued his exploration tirelessly until the sun began to set and darkness enveloped the landscape. Reluctantly, he drove home. He wasn't the only one who ventured out like this. Many adventurers did the same, not just when Karazhan disappeared, but even during normal times. Some did it for fun, while others gambled to see who could get closest to the tower. However, no one had ever succeeded. As soon as Brian arrived home, he saw a small figure that filled him with pride. His son, Charles. "Little guy, why are you out here? Is your headache gone?" Brian asked, scooping up his son and carrying him into the house. Brian worked for a scientific research institute in Nevada and was usually very busy. This time, he was home on vacation. Sometimes he couldn't even make it back for Christmas, and he hadn't seen his son for over 6 months. "No, I won't have headaches anymore," Charles said with a smile. He had developed special abilities when he was 9 years old. At first, he thought he was going crazy as his mind was filled with chaotic voices. It wasn't until he was 12, just last year, that he began to understand those voices were other people's thoughts. He fully realized this 6 months ago, less than a month after Brian had left. "That's good. Tomorrow, we'll go thank Dr. Brown together," Brian said. "Ah," Charles replied. Dr. Brown was his primary physician and had been studying his case. Although Dr. Brown hadn't cured him, Charles had learned to protect himself and not reveal his special abilities to outsiders. Brian gave credit to Dr. Brown for that. "Daddy, did that tower disappear?" Charles asked. "Yes," Brian replied, ruffling his son's hair with a smile. "I wasn't lying. The story is true. You can toast me a glass of wine at dinner later, okay?" Charles smiled, feeling reassured that he wasn't the only different person in the world. It was just a pity he hadn't been accepted there. Like many others, Charles often ventured to Karazhan only to get lost or find his way out on his own. But he never gave up. Fortunately, he had a younger sister. Sharon came out, her face full of anger. "Is there any father who would actually encourage his son to drink?" "Ahem, my wife. Don't be angry. I was just joking," Brian said, trying to placate her. "Humph," Sharon huffed. After dinner, Charles secretly took an extra cake and went back to his bedroom. "Raven, Raven," he called out. A small dark blue figure stepped out. "Why did you take so long?" "I'm starving," Raven said, already devouring the cake. "I haven't figured out how to introduce you yet. They came back suddenly and almost scared me to death," Charles explained. Meanwhile, at Kamartaj, the Ancient One was making kung fu tea. She paused when she heard the news from her disciples. "Did Karazhan disappear again? Could it be that he is going to be promoted again? Isn't it too fast?" she mused. "The last time I saw him, he was still in the middle of the legend. He just appeared a year and a half ago, and now he's disappeared again? How many years until the next awakening? Who can guess?" End of this chapter. Chapter 96. Diana's New Job. A small yellow taxi stopped in front of the White House. The chaos in the Washington, D.C. area is really at its limit, but it can't stop us, an old man said irritably. Immediately, a young black man got out of the car, carrying a champagne gold box with a special logo printed on it, Monarch. "Hi, Miss Diana, I'm Bill Landa, and I'm here to see Senator Willis." "Hello, Mr. Landa. I left you a message this morning to inform you that today's meeting needs to be rescheduled. I think it should be possible to arrange it next week or the week after," the secretary replied with a polite smile. Upon closer inspection, it was none other than Wonder Woman Diana Prince. How could she be the secretary of the White House? At that moment, the door of the office opened, and an old man with a constipated expression came out. His expression became even more strained upon seeing Bill Landa. "My God! Al, how are you doing these days?" "So you didn't receive the message, did you? I told you to reschedule," Senator Willis said, shaking hands reluctantly. "Oh, did you? I must have missed it." "Just a minute," Bill Landa said. "Okay," Senator Willis replied, reluctantly ushering him into the office. "Don't make a long speech. It's only 5 minutes, and I'm going to be late for a meeting. So, what kind of monster are you looking for this time?" Diana, outside, pricked up her ears and listened carefully. "This is an unknown island in the South Pacific captured by satellite. It has never been detected before. It has been mentioned in the legends of many civilizations, Skull Island. There, God has not yet finished the creation," Bill Landa explained. "The Castle Bravo experiment in 1954 was not purely a science experiment. It was an attempt to destroy this thing," the old man continued. The young black man next to him handed over a file. It showed a U.S. Navy warship mysteriously destroyed, covered with huge claw marks. It had forcibly torn a 200-meter warship into rubbish. Diana, outside, was shocked. They mentioned the Castle Bravo experiment? It seemed she was in the right place. "The island is where myth meets science," Bill Landa added. "Landa, you're telling a story." Senator Willis shook his head, picking up his briefcase and leaving. It was impossible for him to approve such a child's play task. President Truman didn't think it was telling a story when he allocated funds to the Imperial Project. Bill Landa hurriedly chased after him. This was the last chance. The South Vietnam War was coming to an end, and they had no other opportunities. If you want to talk about wasting money, the Emperor Project is a good example of finding alien life. You should have broken up a few years ago. Senator Willis said curtly. Listen, the Landsat program is going to send people to that island. They just need to pick us up, Bill Landa insisted. What do you expect to find? Senator Willis asked. Some resources, medicine, a cure for cancer, geological discoveries. To be honest, we don't know what's there. But one thing we're sure of is that tomorrow night, the Solguan satellite will sweep over that area. Within 3 days, they'll see what we see in these images. So no matter what is on the island, you want us to discover it first, right? The young black man said carelessly. Although this is not my style of speaking, what you said makes sense. I will try to let you go with me, but listen to me, just this time. The last time, there will be no next time. The senator issued an ultimatum. Okay. Bill Landa agreed. Mr. Senator, there is one last thing. We need the protection of the military. Bill Landa added. Watching the backs of the three leaving one after another, Diana hesitated for a moment, then packed her things and prepared to leave. At that moment, she received a call. Hello? Duke is awake. Tears filled Diana's beautiful eyes. Although she was able to talk to Duke basically in her sleep, that feeling was not comfortable. Not being able to touch each other was like visiting a prison through glass. You can see, hear, but not touch. Diana? I understand, Carlos, Diana said, wiping her wet eyes. I'll go back after I've dealt with things here, he said. Oh, by the way, our old neighbors have been trying to contact us, haven't they? Diana replied. The old neighbor she referred to was the bald Professor X. After the events of X-Men First Class, the paralyzed professor had transformed Westchester's mansion into a mutant academy. Oh, by the way, he's not bald yet. P.S. The X-Men will not make many appearances. Additionally, for the needs of the plot, the timeline of the story will be slightly altered. Just a heads up, Abbott, I do not accept questions or random inquiries regarding this. Thank you. Diana thought for a moment. Should we ask Duke and see what he says? According to Duke's instructions before his hibernation, contact was possible, but it was not advisable to get involved in the mutant conflicts. Oh, by the way, people are awake. Hey, I almost forgot. Okay, then come back early. At this time, Duke in Karajan was feeling a bit melancholic. He had been asleep for 28 years, and it was now 1973. He had failed to reach the demigod status. In fact, this deep sleep had only advanced him from the middle stage to the late stage of the advanced legend. It seemed that his periods of sleep were getting longer and longer. It had taken him 21 years to be promoted to legend, and he had woken up in the middle of the legend stage. Then, advancing to the late stage, he had fallen asleep for another 28 years. He had already figured out his divine goal, although it was still a bit vague. Waking up melancholy was because he found his memory had become jumbled, as if two parallel memories were being produced. But soon, this sense of confusion disappeared, and everything returned to normal. Duke frowned. Could it be because Uncle Wolf was about to change the timeline? The year 1973 was indeed an interesting one. Uncle Wolf had returned to this year to stop the Big Cousin, and the Sentinel program was canceled. As a result, history had split into two trends, an old line and a new timeline. The memory confusion was likely due to this. However, it was only a moment of confusion, less than a second, and then it vanished. Duke understood that he must have stopped the future Sentinel project later, which meant there would be no more scenes of Uncle Wolf traveling back to change history. Therefore, the disordered memory disappeared almost as soon as it began. But in fact, Duke was not sure when Uncle Wolf had returned, whether it was 1973 or 1975. When Uncle Wolf left in his car, there was an announcement saying that the withdrawal of the last army would mark the official end of the war. P.S. X-Men, Days of Future Past, 22 minutes and 33 seconds. But the last withdrawal was in 1975. In March 1975, the United States officially withdrew its ground troops, and on April 30th at 7:53 a.m., the last helicopter carrying Americans flew away, marking the end of the war for the United States. Judging from the broadcast, it should have been 1975, not 1973. However, when the eldest cousin disguised herself as a colonel and entered the barracks where the mutants were resting, she once picked up a document titled Trask Group Blood Test Report, which recorded the date as January 1973. P.S. X-Men, Days of Future Past, 25 minutes and 45 seconds. Therefore, there might have been an error in the broadcast, a problem with the translation, or a difference in the end time as recorded by different sources. Uncle Wolf changed the timeline, so it should be 1973. End of this chapter. Chapter 97. Changing the Future? Dr. Erskine was sipping tea when Duke awoke. Thanks to Duke's good habits, everyone in Karajan had developed a taste for tea, perhaps for health reasons. However, Diana still preferred coffee, though she didn't mind tea either. After being asleep for 28 years, Dr. Erskine looked much the same as he did in Captain America: The First Avenger. Before falling asleep, he had transformed the gem into a potion of life. Unfortunately, due to its immaturity and numerous side effects, using himself as a test subject had fixed his age at middle-aged. Despite this, his physique remained robust, and he could still handle a few rounds of physical exertion. "Boss, you're awake!" Dr. Erskine exclaimed, nearly choking on his tea when he saw Duke emerge. "How have you been these days?" Duke asked. "Hey, I've been managing," Dr. Erskine replied, scratching his head awkwardly. "Where's Bucky?" Duke inquired. "Oh, he came back 50 years ago and is currently in cryogenic stasis," Dr. Erskine explained, leading Duke to see Bucky. The equipment was far more advanced than the devices used by the Hydra base, exuding an aura of cutting-edge technology. "I've been searching for him for 5 years. Truly persistent," Duke remarked, looking at the sleeping Bucky with a mix of emotions. He was indeed a loyal friend. However, as expected, Captain America was still missing. "Boss, you're back," Samir said, rushing in. "Not bad, you've reached the mid-stage of the hero level," Duke observed, noting Samir's strength. With his current level, he could almost guard a mage temple. "It took 28 years to overcome this hurdle, boss." "Don't tease me. I feel embarrassed," Samir coughed awkwardly. "By the way, what about you, boss?" "I'm at the late legend stage," Duke replied. "Ah," Samir shuddered. "Then congratulations in advance on entering the demigod realm." "It's not that easy to become a demigod." "Forget it." Duke waved his hand dismissively and looked around. "Where's Diana? Where did Carlos go?" "Carlos went to call the proprietress. As for Diana, she's working as a secretary in the White House," Samir explained, feeling a bit ashamed. The proprietress had already infiltrated the center of power. "Ah," Duke was also confused. "Diana is at the White House? Why?" His wife had changed careers multiple times. She was a doctor when he first fell asleep and a sculptor the second time. Now she had reached the center of power. Truly impressive. "I'm not entirely sure. The proprietress mentioned something about an ancient giant beast, a prehistoric monster created by the gods. She wanted to investigate it. She's been looking into it for the past 5 years and only went to the White House last year," Samir explained. "A big monster?" Duke was taken aback. "Could it be?" "No, it couldn't be King Kong, could it?" "Duke," Carlos called out as he approached. "Diana said she'll return after finishing her business. Also, our old neighbor has been trying to contact us. What do you think?" Yes, Samir added, remembering. "A guy named McCoy contacted the kitchen staff not long ago. According to your instructions, I didn't meet him." "McCoy? Hank McCoy?" Duke asked. "Yes, that's the name." "Boss, how do you know him?" Samir inquired. "Hank McCoy, also known as Beast, with his blue fur and all. What could he want?" Duke pondered for a moment. "How long until Diana returns?" Duke asked. "At least 3 to 5 days," Carlos replied. "All right," Duke said, thinking it over. "Samir, come with me to meet our old neighbor." With that, he walked out. Samir, though puzzled by the sudden change of plans, quickly followed. It was now August 1973. There were still 16 days left before the significant event involving the mutant soldiers. Duke had been contemplating whether to intervene. Sentinel Project. The decision to initiate the Sentinel Project would erase the old timeline and create a new one. However, he hesitated momentarily before deciding to stop. According to his plan, William Stryker was Ant to be killed. Eliminating Stryker would alter the events of X-Men Days of Future Past, X-Men Apocalypse, X-Men 2, and the Wolverine series. Essentially, the subsequent X-Men storyline would take a very different path. Even if his cousin were to kill Bolivar Trask, the founder of the Sentinel Project, the old X-Men timeline would still be altered. Moreover, this world isn't solely an X-Men world. Mutants make up less than a small percentage of its content. Changing it would have minimal impact on the world at large, only affecting the future of mutants with little consequence for others. Another crucial point is that it isn't Wolverine who changes the mutants' future, but Duke. Therefore, Wolverine wouldn't travel back in time, resulting in a single unified timeline, a completely new mutant future crafted by Duke. Knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed through the dilapidated Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, now shut down. "What's up?" came the voice of Hank McCoy, also known as the Beast, as he opened the door. Duke recognized him immediately, though he didn't know the actor's name. He knew Hank because of his connection to his cousin. In 2011, Hank started dating Duke's cousin while filming X-Men First Class, but they broke up in early 2013. They reunited during the filming of X-Men Days of Future Past in August 2013, only to break up again later. The first time might have been genuine, but the second time seemed more like a publicity stunt. With the release of Days of Future Past, the hype around their reunion naturally ended. Then came Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix, with the latter being particularly awkward. "It's you?" Hank didn't recognize Duke, as Duke was quite mysterious and rarely seen. However, he did recognize Samir, standing behind him. They had contacted each other before, but Samir had never met Duke in person. "McCoy, right? This is my boss, Mr. Duke," Samir introduced. Realizing the importance of his visitor, Hank quickly stepped aside. "Please, come in." "Is the professor here?" Duke asked, glancing around. The interior looked much like it did in Days of Future Past. "Yes, I'll ask him to come down," Hank replied, hurrying upstairs. Duke was a legend in New York, known to many. Some people debated whether this world was more Marvel or DC. Fans of DC often avoided Marvel, and vice versa. However, those who had read the entire first chapter would know that this world wasn't exclusively Marvel or DC. It included elements from King Kong, Godzilla, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and more. The name Mayman was coined based on the space Marvel occupied, but it wasn't entirely accurate. The person who posted that debate clearly hadn't read the story, not even a single chapter. End of this chapter. Chapter 98, The Lost Magic, Arc of Manifestation. Soon, a thin, greasy man appeared. His appearance was quite disheveled. His hair looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks, greasy and tangled. His clothes were a mess, and lice could be seen scurrying about. He was already thin, but his loose pants made it seem like his lower limbs were atrophied, giving him a sweeping gait as he walked. "What a terrible professor," Duke muttered, pouting. "Very bad," Samir echoed. Duke didn't have a cleanliness fetish, and he himself could be a bit sloppy at times. However, he always maintained a relatively tidy appearance when facing others. The most unkempt person in Karazhan was Samir, who dressed like a witcher. Although his attire was clean, it still looked quite dirty, reminiscent of Uncle Wolf in Van Helsing. Duke raised his hand, and a blue light suddenly appeared. A stream of clear water burst forth, circling the professor several times at high speed. Then the water disappeared, and a cloud of flames engulfed the professor. Before Hank could react, the water and fire vanished, leaving behind a clean and refreshed professor, only missing a sparkling shine. The two were a little confused. Professor X was also dumbfounded, almost thinking he was going to die just now. "What is this?" The professor looked at his clean clothes, bewildered. Less than 2 seconds had passed, and it seemed like magic. "This is what you've always wanted to touch, the power of magic," Duke explained. "Magic? Why don't you serve tea? This is not the way to treat guests." "I'll go right away," Hank McCoy, a fan of Duke, said as he hurried out. It seems we don't have tea here. Is coffee okay?" "Yes, no sugar added. Let's get to know each other formally. I'm Duke, the master of Karazhan." "Charles Xavier, the owner of this old house, your old neighbor." The two shook hands, and Charles made a light-hearted joke. "I know you. When I was young, you used to explore my place, right?" Duke smiled and found a sofa to sit on. "It's a bit much to say adventure, but I wasn't the only one." Charles smiled, then began a formal exchange. "I don't know. The little girl in blue, is she here?" Duke pretended to be unclear and looked around. I remember when you were a child, you often ran to my place with her. Charles' expression changed immediately. Raven? Coincidentally, the beast returned with coffee, quickly changing the topic. She left school. Let's not talk about her. Mr. Duke, are you here today? Thanks, Duke said, taking a sip of the coffee. Not bad. The professor's coffee was, of course, of good quality. It's really impossible not to mention her regarding today's matter. Trask Industries, have you heard of it? Duke asked, slowly putting down the cup. Trask Industries? Charles paused, then nodded. Bolivar Trask? A very talented scientist and the #1 enemy of mutants. Want to see your future? Duke suddenly smiled mysteriously. Future? The professor and the beast were all confused. What did he mean by future? The future of mutants is very grim. Everything started after she killed Bolivar Trask. As he spoke, Duke waved his hands, and an 80-inch holographic image suddenly appeared in midair. It showed a scene of a group of mutants fighting future sentinels, the beginning of X-Men, Days of Future Past. Seeing the mutants being killed one by one, the professor and Hank trembled. This is... The professor inside the image was already old, indicating it was at least 50 years in the future. Samir, standing next to Duke, was also a little confused. The boss's magic was so cool. Duke's new magic, Lost Magic Arc of Manifestation, was from Rastiros, one of the 7 families of purgatory of the Devil's Heart Guild in Fairy Tale. It was a reward for obtaining the Cosmic Rubik's Cube. Lost Magic Arc of Manifestation is a type of imaginary magic that can turn all imaginary. Duke had the ability to turn his imagination into reality, but there were certain restrictions and deconditions, including the need for a high level of concentration. He could manifest an imaginary dragon into reality, but the strength of the manifested creature was limited to the caster's own power level. In Duke's case, he could manifest a dragon with the strength equivalent to a late legendary level. The holographic image being displayed was based on this magic. Medivh's future illusion magic could produce similar effects, though it was more complex. To convince the professor, Duke chose not to use the older version of the bald professor, but instead aged the new version. Despite the drastic change in appearance, the professor was still recognizable at a glance. The professor's breath almost stopped. They are all partners you will have in the future, Duke replied. These were people who hadn't yet joined the school. The hologram showed a massive black-scale robot smashing Colossus' head with a single punch. It also crushed Iceman's head into pieces, suffocated Pyro to death, and pierced both Blink and Storm. Bishop was blown to pieces by 3 impacts, and Magneto was seriously injured and died. It's impossible, the professor exclaimed, standing up abruptly. This is fake! It's fake! If you still have the ability, you will know that these are true, Duke said, smiling as he turned off the hologram with a wave of his hand. If the professor had the ability to hack into Duke's consciousness, he would find that this was indeed a fake. Hank trembled slightly. What about me? He hadn't seen himself in the image. Did that mean? You are a little lucky that you didn't die at the hands of the future Sentinel, but your ending is also not good. Trust me, it's better not to ask, Duke said with a playful smile. Hank swallowed hard, genuinely scared. What are those? The ability to assimilate mutants and transform them into the ability to restrain opponents. What kind of monster is this? The professor asked, still in shock. These are Sentinels, future Sentinels. It all started after Riven killed Bolivar Trask. Future Sentinels are beyond the existence of mutants because scientists have mastered Riven's genes. The new Sentinel cyborgs can mimic the abilities of mutants to fight mutants, Duke explained. The two were terrified. Not only can they copy the abilities of mutants, but they can also preserve them. They are not as stupid as the first-generation Sentinels. They have advanced intelligence, know how to cooperate, and know how to find the weaknesses of mutants to attack. They know how to exchange abilities to fight mutants with different powers, Duke continued. Sentinels also have self-healing abilities, and they don't have an ounce of metal in their bodies, so don't expect your old friend Magneto to help. They are not human, and your abilities are useless against them. In a word, future Sentinels can perfectly replicate the abilities of mutants and use them flexibly. The professor let out a long breath and sat heavily on the chair, his back soaked with sweat. End of this chapter. Chapter 99. Stopping Ravenfax have proven that the bald professor is still very intelligent. It didn't take long for him to sense the problem. Wait, what are you guys doing? The beast also looked over. You mean, why don't we care about your mutants' lives? To put it bluntly, that is the end of your mutants, not our future, Duke said, pausing for a moment. Do you know how many groups of capable people there are in this world? Could it be that if one party is in trouble, the others have to come from all directions? There is an old proverb in the East which is called, "It's nothing to do with yourself," and that's probably what it means. Duke had said what could be said, but naturally, he wouldn't mention what couldn't be said. He wouldn't reveal that the future Sentinel would eventually be able to identify the mutant genes hidden in the human body, leading to a chaotic world. He wondered if the scientists who promoted the future Sentinel project had relatives with mutant genes. In the end, their own creations might kill them. Ridiculous. The professor was covered in cold sweat again and sat weakly on the chair. He began to have some doubts. Did mutants do something that would be mercilessly abandoned by the world in the future? This kind of sentinel is extremely harmful at first glance. No one cares about their mutants. This is simply an abandoned child. No, mutants can't go on like this. They have to change. Mr. Duke, are you here for this too? The professor asked. I'm a kind person, and I can't bear to watch you mutants continue on this doomsday path, so I'm here to inform you, Duke said. Hank clenched his fists firmly. Stop, Raven. You said that they got her mutant gene after they captured Raven, and then they created the future Sentinel. Then we just need to stop Raven. The future can be reversed if she is not caught. This is indeed a feasible solution, but it only treats the symptoms, not the root cause. Duke shook his head. The professor understood too. The focus is on Bolivar Trask himself and his Project Sentinel. That's right. As long as Bolivar Trask is permanently locked up and the president suspends the Sentinel project, this is the fundamental solution to the mutant problem once and for all, Duke said. Of course, the mutant problem can never be completely solved. As long as there are mutants that endanger humanity, their problems will never be fully resolved, but at least Sentinels won't appear again. As for the various troublesome problems afterward, Professor X and the others are fully capable of solving them by themselves. How? Asked the professor. We need a big villain. When this big villain wants to kill the president, you will come forward to stop it. The mutant saves the president. I guess the president will be grateful? Of course, the premise is that Bolivar Trask cannot die in this battle, Duke said. The professor immediately understood. Oh no, you don't mean to want Eric. Oh no, no. This is not okay. Eric must not be released. Of course, we just need a big villain. As for who can be the big villain, Raven can do it too. It's just that Raven's ability is too weak and can't bring exciting attention to the president and the cabinet. The visual effects, Duke smiled. Don't look at me. I'm not a villain. I'm a positive character. The professor was depressed. Indeed, if you want to achieve the Save the President achievement, Eric's destructive power is undoubtedly the best. The magnetic control field can collapse the entire stadium. There is no doubt that the visual effect on people will be very strong, so if Eric is stopped again, the feeling of rebirth after disaster will be even stronger. If it was Raven, it wouldn't be able to create such a sensational effect. Is it really necessary to release that monster and murderer? The professor was melancholy. Wait, did you say you just now? He suddenly realized, a little stunned. Then, what about you? I have more important things to do, Duke replied. In this world, you're not the only mutants facing the doomsday disaster. He will help you, Duke pointed to Samir and said. Originally, there were only 3 people in Days of Future Past, the Professor, the Beast, and Wolverine. But now, Wolverine is gone and replaced by Samir. Wolverine in 73 had not yet reached hero-level strength. He was still an elite. Replacing him with Samir, a mid-level hero, significantly boosts their strength. If this isn't settled, you can go home, wash up, and sleep, Duke added. The boss wants to say, prehistoric giant beast? Samir suddenly understood something. Ah, Duke gave him an appreciative look, as expected of a sensible subordinate. The professor was shocked. What prehistoric monster? He asked, stunned. You don't need to worry about that. Just know one thing. If you let them do nothing, it will truly trigger the end of the world, Duke said, waving his hand dismissively. With your current strength, you're not yet involved at this level, so take care of your mutants first. The professor took a deep breath and sighed. Well, if you want to prevent a big disaster, then we need to get Eric. But how do we rescue him? He's on the th floor underground of a fortified building. We have no way to get in and come out. I can rescue him. Once you have a detailed plan, contact Samir within a week, and I will bring him back to you, Duke assured. He then stood up and walked out. Let's go, Samir. I have to upgrade your equipment first. You can't have metal on your body if you're dealing with Magneto. After that, Diana and Carlos need upgrades too. Look at the situation. If things over there progress slowly, I will help you from the side, but I will only take action at critical moments. If things start over there first, you can only rely on yourself, Duke said as he turned and left Xavier's School for Gifted Youth. The professor and the Beast exchanged glances. They had to see which story would trigger first, Skull Island or Reversing the Future. If both happened simultaneously, Samir would need to be arranged accordingly. Ideally, they would solve the troubles of the big cousin first and then open the portal to Skull Island. But it all depended on the trigger time. Duke suddenly remembered something. Where was Uncle Wolf now? Was he in Gwen's bed in 1973 or South Vietnam at this time? Victor, no. Get ready, aim, execution of shooting. When you're done playing, remember to wake me up. End of this chapter. Chapter 100. It seems King Kong will be staged first. At this time in South Vietnam, in a prison cell within a U.S. military camp that has yet to be evacuated, two beasts are being held. Hello, I'm Major William Stryker. You have been accused of killing a senior military officer. Is the quality control correct? William Stryker? It turned out to be a young version of William Stryker, not the older version from Wolverine 1, but the younger man from Days of Future Past. It makes sense. It should be a young version at this moment. If it were the older version, he would still be quite powerful, having not aged much over the past 40 years. We like to challenge authority, Victor said, grabbing a dirt mouse running around on his shoulder and teasing it. Don't talk nonsense, Logan frowned. Are you tired of running away? Afraid to face your own nature? Stryker pressed. None of your business. Victor, the saber-toothed tiger, retorted bluntly, while Logan, as always, handled everything with a calm demeanor. I know how special and valuable you are. Listen, you can be locked up like monsters, or join me. I'm starting a task force. Tell me, do you want to serve your country? So the two readily agreed. Although they were somewhat tired of their long lives, no one liked being locked in a cell. A day later, the two flew to Lagos by plane. As a result, Ghost, Thunderman, Meatball, Agent Zero, Deadpool, and other friends went online. Oh, it's future Deadpool. No, Deadpool is unlikely to be born. What a pity. William Stryker was bound to die, and there would be no later synthetic monsters. What about Lagos? This city is really unlucky. It was blown up by a group of mutants in Wolverine 1, and it was blown up again by Ome in Captain America 3. Oh no, what an unlucky city. 2 days later, Diana returned. After the customary 1-hour cordial exchange, the two talked about serious matters. If there were no important matters, they could communicate for a few more hours. Honey, are you sure? These so-called prehistoric monsters were created by gods? Duke asked, looking at the monster guide that Diana had brought back. He was a little confused. Although he was not sure, he still recognized some monsters, such as Muto the cockroach, Ghidorah the three-headed dragon, Mothra the butterfly, Radon the pterodactyl, and a very strange-looking T-Rex Godzilla. Seeing these big monsters, Duke could basically conclude that he was connected to the plot of Emperor's Project. Here was a scan of the shape of Skull Island. Hey, there seemed to be a big suite in it. It's called Shan. If he accessed Godzilla 2, he could still meet Z. Forget it. Let's look at the present first. That's what happened in the next few decades. As far as Godzilla is concerned, there are dozens of movies, various comics, and the settings are constantly changing. The version he remembers most clearly was caused by radiation. But at present, if you come into contact with the version of Godzilla 2014, the setting should be the descendants of the apex predatory race in the Permian ecosystem, and the same is true for Muto, the cockroach monster. As for the three-headed jellyfish Ghidorah, Duke only remembered that it seemed to be an alien creature. As for the others, he was not very clear. But Godzilla, a creature of the Permian, 2.5 million years ago, was this also created by the gods? It's not good for other giant beasts, but this is too long, right? 2.5 million years ago, gods appeared on the earth? But if you think about it carefully, it doesn't seem so strange. This is Marvel Earth. If the ancestors of these giant beasts come from the gods through scientific research, it is not difficult to accept. After all, there is the Nordic Asa god realm on the earth, and there are also the Olympus gods, the pyramid gods, the Chinese gods, and so on. In addition, there are ancient gods far earlier than this, such as the god of the underworld, Sithorn. Billions of years ago, the natural vitality of the biosphere here on Earth. The ancient gods, some of the earliest life forms on Earth, gave birth to a group of old gods. It is not surprising that the earliest ancestor of Godzilla, who lived during the Permian period 2.5 million years ago, was a creation of both divine and scientific origins. These ancient gods emerged billions of years ago, and their exact origins remain a mystery. Note, some settings have been slightly altered to fit the plot. Paradise Island's literature records some of this history, but not all. These beings were not created by modern gods. To fully understand their origins, we would need to trace back to an even older era, Diana explained. Oh, I see, Duke responded, raising his eyebrows slightly. He realized that tracing their origins was futile. The ancient gods had either perished in the annals of history, been exiled to other dimensions, or left Earth on their own. The remaining gods, including those of the Olympus pantheon, had also met their end. I have obtained the necessary permit, and I can fly to South Vietnam tonight, Diana informed him. In such a hurry? Duke was taken aback. The last time he woke up from a deep sleep, he was eager to train the U.S. team. This time, it was his wife who was eager to study the giant monster. All right, we can teleport there directly, but I need to say goodbye to my neighbors first, Duke sighed. It seemed that the King Kong scenario was about to unfold. Neighbors? Diana asked, puzzled. Duke explained the situation to her, causing Diana's expression to become serious. Is this something you discovered while traveling in the Star World? She inquired. Yes, Duke admitted, feeling a wave of panic. He continued, if this is the case, then the mutants are truly pitiful. The most alarming part is that in the future, Sentinels will be able to detect the X gene hidden in the human body. This is terrifying. Among 100 people who carry the mutant gene, it's rare for even one to awaken. If this continues, humanity will be on the path to self-destruction. Duke shook his head and sighed. Intermarriage between different races, nationalities, and countries will become common in the future. As a result, X gene carriers could spread worldwide. Even if only 1% of the population carries the gene, that's still millions of people who could die for no reason. What did they do to deserve this? It's like making children pay for their parents' mistakes. I know you might kill people in the future, so I want to kill you now. Does that make any sense? Duke was about to take drastic action. The Sentinel project must be stopped, Diana said through gritted teeth. If Sentinels appear in the future, it will be no different from fighting another World War II. Duke nodded in agreement. Agreed. End of this chapter.